In the high-security archives of the National Security Agency, there is a section known colloquially as the freezer. It is not a place for bodies, but for data that refuses to obey the laws of physics. Within this vault, housed in a lead-lined container, sits a single spool of Ampex 456 magnetic tape. It was recorded on November 14, 1984, during a routine signal test in a decommissioned Nevada mine. For decades, it was labeled as a classified failure recording of empty, dead air. But in late 2024, using modern laser interferometry to read the microscopic magnetic alignments on the tape, forensic researchers found an anomaly that should be mathematically impossible. Buried beneath the 1984 tape hiss was a high-definition digital quality voice. This voice does not belong to the 20th century. It describes, in terrifying detail, geopolitical events scheduled for the year 2026. This is a file that was erased by time itself, only to reappear when our technology was finally advanced enough to hear it. This is a hidden truth, an encrypted paradox that suggests the future has already been archived. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound in this room is the quiet, rhythmic hum of the server rack. The air is filtered, stripped of moisture, and kept at a constant, biting chill to preserve the integrity of the storage media. When you touch the edge of a classified folder, the paper feels cold and the ink on the original 1984 logs has faded, turning from a deep black to a ghostly gray, as if the secrets written there are trying to vanish. To understand the weight of this discovery, we must first look at the nature of the tape itself. In 1984, audio was captured by aligning ferric oxide particles on a plastic ribbon. It was an analog world, imperfect, warm, and limited. Magnetic coercivity dictates that a tape can only hold what is placed upon it by a recording head at the moment of creation. It is a linear progression of time. However, File 84 Goma defies this linear reality. When forensic audio expert Dr. Julian Vane began his analysis, he expected to find the usual degradation, the vinegar syndrome that eats away at old archives. Instead, his sensors detected a frequency spike at 14.2 kHz. This is a frequency range usually reserved for modern digital compression, a signature that did not exist in the analog landscape of the 1980s. As he isolated the signal, the quiet dread began to settle in the laboratory. The voice that emerged was not the distorted, warbling tone of a 40-year-old recording. It was crisp. It was clean. It possessed the clinical resonance of a modern AI-synthesized broadcast. The subject of the recording, a detailed breakdown of a global currency reset, involving technologies that would not be conceptualized for another 3 decades. Consider the intellectual curiosity this evokes. How does a 1984 magnetic particle know how to align itself into a high-fidelity digital wave from the future? Is it possible that certain locations on Earth like the Nevada Site Alpha mine act as temporal basins, places where the future leaks into the past through acoustic vibrations? The researchers were not just listening to a recording, they were listening to an echo of a time that hasn't happened yet. They called it acoustic archaeology. It is the study of sounds buried in the environment, waiting for the right tool to dig them up. But as they dug deeper into File 84 Gamma, they realized the tape wasn't just recording the future, it was recording a warning. In the analytical silence of the archive, the implications begin to take shape. If this recording exists, then the timeline is fixed. The events described on the tape, the failures, the collapses, the specific names of people who are children today but will be leaders tomorrow, already set in stone. This is the archive chill. It is the cold realization that our history and our future might be sitting on the same shelf, filed away by an intelligence that understands time better than we do. Dr. Vane noted in his private, redacted journal that the voice on the tape seemed aware of being recorded. At one point, the speaker pauses and says, "I know you are listening, Julian." In 1984, Julian Vane was 4 years old. The air in the vault seems to grow thinner as you process this. The intellectual curiosity shifts into something heavier, reflection on the nature of our own existence. Are we merely players in a pre-recorded loop? Is the static we hear on old radios not just interference, but the overlapping chatter of 1,000 different years, all trying to occupy the same frequency? We move now into the forensic breakdown of the metadata header. In modern computing, metadata tells us when a file was created and who created it. In 1984, metadata was primitive. Yet, the 84 Gamma tape contains ghost headers. When viewed under a scanning electron microscope, the magnetic particles are arranged in a pattern that mimics modern QR codes. When scanned, these codes reveal a coordinates list for a series of vaults located across the Tier 1 nations and in New York, Tokyo, and Zurich. Each vault is said to contain a similar tape, a piece of a puzzle, a narrative of a 21st century that was already written before the 20th century even reached its midpoint. The archival researchers at the NSA began to refer to this as the Project Echo Chamber. They weren't just storing records. They were trying to prevent the public from realizing that the future is actually just a playback of a very old recording, that as we sit in the stillness of this archive, we must ask ourselves why this information is only surfacing now. Why was the tape left in a decommissioned mine? Why was it not destroyed? Some analysts believe the tape was left as a time capsule for the ears, a way for the past to guide the future, or perhaps a way for the future to haunt the past. The technical specifications of the 84 Gamma voice are particularly unsettling. Forensic linguists have analyzed the speech patterns, noting a transatlantic accent that has been extinct since the 1950s, yet the speaker uses technical jargon from the 2030s. It is a linguistic hybrid, a voice that exists everywhere and nowhere. In time. Let us dwell for a moment on the concept of magnetic memory. In the archival world, we are taught that magnets are the enemy of data. A strong enough magnetic field can wipe a lifetime of work in a fraction of a second. But the 84 Gamma anomaly suggests a reverse process, a magnetic field so powerful and so precise that it can imprint information across the barrier of years. Deep within the Nevada mine, the geological composition is unique. The walls are rich in magnetite and quartz minerals known for their piezoelectric and magnetic properties. Scientists now hypothesize that the mine itself acted as a giant, natural recording head. During a massive solar flare in 1984, the Earth's magnetosphere fluctuated so violently that it synced with the high-energy, digital transmissions of the future. The mine captured the data leak. The Ampex tape, sitting in a technician's recorder at that exact moment, became the accidental vessel for this temporal overflow. This brings us to the forensic paradox. To the casual observer, the tape sounds like white noise. It requires a specific set of digital filters that didn't exist until 5 years ago to sift the voice from the static. This implies that the future was always there, hidden in the background noise of our lives, simply waiting for us to become smart enough to hear it. The quiet dread returns when we consider the erasure order. In 1986, just 2 years after the recording, the Department of Energy ordered the Nevada site to be filled with 50,000 tons of specialized concrete. They claimed it was due to unstable geological foundations, but the archival records tell a different story. They show that the order was signed by a committee that didn't officially exist, a committee dedicated to frequency management. They weren't trying to stop the mine from collapsing. They were trying to stop the mine from listening. Intellectual curiosity leads us to wonder if the 1984 tape recorded the voices of 2026. What is being recorded right now? As you lie there, the digital devices in your room, the phone, the smart speaker, the router, all operating on frequencies that are being etched into the very environment around you. In 40 years, will an archival researcher look back and find your current thoughts, your current breathing recorded on a medium we haven't even invented yet? The 84 Gamma voice continues on the tape, its tone becoming increasingly analytical. It discusses the bifurcation of reality. It suggests that by listening to the tape, we are changing the very future it describes. This is the observer effect applied to time itself. The act of archiving the future might be the very thing that causes that future to manifest. Forensic linguist Dr. Alina Moretti, who worked alongside Dr. Vane, pointed out a specific detail in the recording that she found most disturbing. In the background of the 2026 voice, there is a secondary sound. It is faint, almost rhythmic. After 3 months of isolation and enhancement, she realized it was the sound of a 1984 Ampex tape machine spinning. The recording of the future contains the sound of the machine that was recording it in the past. It is a closed loop, a perfect circle of archival silence. This realization brought a shift in the research team's demeanor. They stopped viewing the tape as a curiosity and began viewing it as a prison. If the future is already on a tape in 1984, then we are all just characters in a script that has already been performed. The archive chill is not just about a mysterious file. It is about the cold weight of destiny. As the clock in the archive strikes the hour, we reflect on the final segments of the 84 Gamma metadata. The very last ghost header on the tape is not a coordinate or a name. It is it points to a specific second, on a specific day, in the near future. The researchers haven't reached that date yet. They are waiting. watching the calendar with a quiet, analytical dread, wondering if that day will be the moment the playback ends and the recording begins. We are left with the image of the Ampex tape, still spinning in its lead-lined box. It is a relic of a time when we thought we understood the world. It is a reminder that in the deep archives of the government, and in the deep archives of the Earth itself, there are frequencies that we are only just beginning to decode. The air remains cold. The servers continue to hum. The file remains open, its secrets bleeding into the present like ink into water. We are not just listeners. We are part of the metadata. Every breath we take is a data point. Every thought is a frequency. And somewhere, in an archive 40 years from now, someone is already listening to us. But as disturbing as the 84 Gamma voice is, it is not the most unsettling discovery at some. When Dr. Vane attempted to map the physical layout of the mine, he found that the acoustic dead zone wasn't moving forward through time. It was moving backward, and according to the latest classified surveys, the site isn't empty. Something is down there, emitting a signal that predates human speech entirely. We move now from the anomaly of the voice to the anomaly of the location itself. To understand why the government buried it in concrete, we must look at the maps they tried to burn. We begin the descent into Subtitle 2, Site Alpha, the mine that was deleted from every map. If you search the official United States Geological Survey database for a location known as Site Alpha, you will find a strange, digital void. Between the coordinates of the Groom Lake Range and the barren silt of the Yucca Flat, there is a square of land exactly 4 miles wide that has been systematically erased from every public record since 1951. This is not a clerical error. It is a classified geographic REDACTION. Inside this void lies a defunct silver mine that the National Security Agency spent billions of dollars to seal, not because of what was taken out of the Earth, but because of what the Earth itself was doing. This location represents the ultimate anomaly, a geological glitch, where the specific mineral composition of the rock creates a natural acoustic mirror. In Site Alpha, the past does not stay behind us. It is encrypted into the stone. Every sound, every scream, and every classified conversation held within these tunnels was not lost to time, it was stored. This is the hidden truth of our planet's capacity for memory. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound in this archive is the quiet, rhythmic hum of the server room. The air is heavy with the scent of ozone and the weight of decades. As you pull the 1952 survey report from its shelf, the paper feels cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. Each page you turn is a step deeper into a place that technically does not exist. To understand Site Alpha, one must look at the maps that were burned. In the late 1940s, the United States was obsessed with the underground. The Cold War required bunkers. But the Nevada desert offered something more, an ancient silver mine with a geological profile that defied standard minerals. The mine, originally christened the Silent Mary in 1892, was abandoned by miners who claimed the tunnels talked back. By 1951, the Atomic Energy Commission took interest. They didn't want the silver, they wanted the silence. When government geologists first descended into the lower shafts of Site Alpha, they carried sensitive acoustic equipment. They found that, at a depth of 400 feet, the ambient noise of the world above vanished completely. But in its place was a lithic latency, a phenomenon, where the rock walls seemed to vibrate with a frequency that matched a human heart. This is the start of our intellectual journey into the rock itself. The mine is composed of a rare vein of high-purity piezoelectric quartz, intertwined with massive deposits of magnetite. In electrical engineering, quartz is used to maintain frequency. Magnetite is used to store data. Together, on a massive, subterranean scale, they formed a natural hard drive. Site Alpha was not just a mine, it was a geological battery capable of capturing the atmospheric vibrations of time. As we analyze the redacted logs from 1954, we see the transition from curiosity to dread. The lead researcher, a man whose name has been erased from the payroll but referred to in files as Subject Zero, noted that the mine did not just record sound, it projected it. He described walking through Tunnel 4 and hearing the distinct sound of a 19th century mining pick hitting stone. Despite being alone in a high-security facility, the analytical mind must ask, is this a haunting, or is it physics? If time is a dimension, then perhaps the specific magnetic density of Site Alpha creates a temporal basin, just as water flows to the lowest point in a valley. Perhaps acoustic waves from different eras flow into this specific geological trap. The government recognized this early on. They realized that if you could read the rock, you could listen to history. But more importantly, They realized that if the rock could record the past, it could also be used to intercept the future. The deeper one goes into the records of Alpha, the more the archival chill sets in. The geological glitch is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, physical occurrence. When a quartz crystal is squeezed, it generates an electric charge. This is the piezoelectric effect. Now, imagine a mountain range subjected to the immense pressure of the Earth's crust. This pressure creates a constant, low-level electrical field within the mine. This electrical field is what allows sound to bypass time. It creates what the NSA internal documents call a frequency bridge. During the 1960s, a series of experiments known as Operation Earshot were conducted within the mine. Technicians would sit in total darkness for 12 hours at a time, wearing specialized headphones, connected directly to the quartz veins via copper needles. They weren't listening to radio waves. They were listening to the rock. The reports from these sessions are terrifyingly clinical. One technician reported hearing a broadcast of the 1969 moon landing 3 years before it happened. Another reported hearing the sound of a large-scale construction project that used tools and machinery that did not match any known technology of the era. The intellectual curiosity of the scientists was quickly replaced by a cold, analytical realization. Alpha was a window into a timeline that was not yet ours. We must reflect on the acoustic shadow in the archives. This term refers to the areas of the mine where no sound exists at all. These are null zones. Forensic researchers found that in these specific areas, the magnetite concentration is so high that it literally eats the surrounding sound waves. If you stand in a null zone and shout, you hear nothing, not even your own voice. It was in one of these null zones that the 1984 tape, the one we discussed in the previous file, was found. The tape recorder had been left in a room where sound shouldn't exist. Yet, when the tape was played back, it was full of voices. This implies that the geological glitch doesn't just record what is in the room. It pulls sound from the atmospheric reservoir of the future and deposits it into the magnetic medium. Why was this location deleted from the maps? To prevent the world from knowing that the Earth is a recording device. If the public understood that every secret, every classified meeting, and every private thought could be recovered from the ground beneath their feet, the entire structure of global security would collapse. Alpha is the ultimate archive. It is a record that cannot be burned, cannot be deleted, and cannot be silenced. The government's solution was the erasure protocol. Between 1985 and 1988, they began the process of acoustic dampening. They injected millions of gallons of a specialized lead-based polymer into the quartz veins. They were trying to short-circuit the mountain. They were trying to kill the mine's memory that as the archive grows colder, we look at the final days of the Alpha project. By 1989, the facility was officially decommissioned. The erasure order had been carried out. Over 50,000 tons of high-density concrete were poured into the main shafts. The government didn't just want to close the mine. They wanted to entomb the information it held. But you cannot entomb physics. Even now, buried under layers of concrete and hidden beneath the Nevada silt, the quartz veins of Alpha are still under pressure. The piezoelectric field is still active. Recent satellite thermography shows that the deleted square of land is 2 degrees warmer than the surrounding desert. This heat is not volcanic. It is the thermal byproduct of a massive electrical resistance. The mine is still trying to record. The quiet dread of the archival researcher comes from knowing that the information leak is inevitable. In the classified files, there is a concept known as acoustic bleed. This is when the sounds captured by Alpha begin to vibrate through the surrounding earth, eventually reaching the surface. Residents of the nearby sparsely populated towns have reported hearing phantom sirens and the sound of low-flying aircraft that are not visible on radar. These are the echoes of the mountain is full, and it is beginning to spill over. When we look at the geological glitch with an analytical eye, we see that the government's attempt to erase the mine was a failure. They didn't stop the recording. They just made it harder to access. Consider the intellectual weight of a deleted mine. If a location is removed from the map, it becomes a ghost. It exists in the physical world, but it has no identity in the digital one. This is how the modern world handles its most dangerous anomalies, not by destroying them, but by making them invisible. But the invisibility of Alpha is fading. As modern sensors become more sensitive, and as our understanding of quantum acoustics grows, the geological glitch is becoming visible again. The archives are being reopened in secret. A new generation of researchers, those who are not bound by the Cold War oaths of their predecessors, are looking for the coordinates. They are looking for the voice of the Earth. We must reflect on what it means to live on a recording. If Alpha exists in Nevada, Where else does it exist? Is every mountain range a potential archive? Is the very ground you walk on a silent witness to everything you have ever said? This is the true archive chill, the realization that we are living in a world that never forgets. The final pages of the Site Alpha file contain a single, handwritten log entry from December 1984. It was written by the last technician to leave the site before the concrete was poured. His handwriting is shaky, the ink smudged as if his hands were trembling. He writes, "The mine is not recording the past anymore. It is recording a single sound, on a loop, from 50 years in the future. It is the sound of someone breathing, and the breathing is getting faster. This is the retention bridge of our reality." The intellectual curiosity of the 1950s led to the classified paranoia of the 1980s, which has now become the modern dread of the 21st century. We are the inheritors of Site Alpha silence. We are the ones who must live with the knowledge that the deleted mine is still there, beneath the sand, vibrating with our future. The analytical data suggests that the geological glitch is not a localized event. Site Alpha is merely a node. It is a point of high concentration in a global network of acoustic storage. The Earth is a hard drive, and we are the data being written into its crust. As we sit in the archive, the server hum feels different now. It feels like an echo of the mine. The archive chill is a reminder that secrets have a way of vibrating through the concrete. No matter how much lead you pour or how many maps you burn, the frequency remains. The file on Site Alpha remains open. The metadata is incomplete. There are still tunnels that were never mapped, and frequencies that were never decoded. The government may have deleted the mine, but they couldn't delete the sound. We are left with the image of the Nevada desert at night, silent, still, but beneath the surface, 400 feet down, the quartz is glowing, the magnetite is spinning, the mine is listening, and it is waiting for the next sound to archive. The question is no longer where Site Alpha is. The question is, what is it recording right now, and who will be the one to listen to it 40 years from today? The archival researchers have a saying, "The stone remembers what the man forgets." As the light in the archive begins to dim, we realize that the geological glitch is not an anomaly of the past. It is the architecture of our future. We are all being recorded into the stone, one breath at a time. But even as the concrete of Site Alpha hardened, a new mystery was being born in the laboratory. The sounds captured in the mine weren't just random echoes. They were organized, they were structured, and they were being harvested by a man who believed that if you could hear the future, you could own it. We move now from the physical location to the secret method used to decode these voices. We begin the transition to Subtitle 3, the glass mic protocol, the classified science used to harvest the temporal echo. In the classified annex of the Fort Meade Signals Intelligence Complex, there is a room with no microphones, no recorders, and no visible sensors. Yet, every word spoken within those four walls is captured with a fidelity that rivals a modern recording studio. This is not accomplished through traditional surveillance. It is the result of the Glass Mic Protocol, a project so sensitive that its very existence was erased from the NSA's budget for 3 decades. The protocol operates on a terrifyingly simple premise. Glass is not a solid, but an amorphous liquid that never stops moving. It is a material that remembers the vibrations of the air. By aiming a low-frequency infrared laser at a window pane, a mirror, or even a glass water pitcher, the government found an anomaly in the fabric of sound. They discovered that glass doesn't just vibrate with the noises of the present. Because of its unique molecular structure, glass acts as a temporal prism, refracting the acoustic energy of the future back into the now. This is the hidden truth behind the glass mic, a device that doesn't just listen to where you are, but to when you are. This encrypted file contains the only surviving evidence of a science that allows the state to harvest echoes from the next century. The file was stamped, "Never open," yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The air here is thin, recycled through HEPA filters that strip the atmosphere of its scent, leaving only the cold, metallic temps of high-voltage electronics. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a plastic sleeve that crackles with static as you pull it from the drawer. The ink on the original 1974 diagrams has faded with secrets, leaving ghostly outlines of machines that shouldn't have existed for another 50 years. To understand the Glass Mic Protocol, we must look at the work of Dr. Eris Thorne. In 1972, Thorne was a disgraced physicist obsessed with acoustic photons. He believed that sound wasn't just a wave moving through air, but a particle that could be trapped within the crystalline lattice of certain materials. Most minerals were too rigid to hold the charge, but glass with its chaotic, liquid-like molecular arrangement was the perfect vessel. Thorne discovered that when a sound wave hits a glass surface, it creates a surface acoustic wave or SAW. These waves are microscopic ripples that move across the glass at incredible speeds. Normally, these ripples dissipate, but Thorne found that in high-purity glass, these ripples leave a permanent thermal scar. It is a microscopic indentation on the molecular level. He realized that every window in every city was, in effect, a massive unread record player. This is where the intellectual curiosity turns into quiet dread. Thorne didn't just find sounds from the past. When he calibrated his first laser interferometer to read these molecular scars, he picked up a frequency that shouldn't have been there. It was a signal vibrating at a rate that matched a future leak found at the Nevada Site Alpha mine. He realized that glass wasn't just recording what happened in the room, it was acting as a temporal capacitor, storing the vibrations of events that had yet to occur. As we analyze the technical schematics in File 77B, we see the laser interferometry array. This was the NSA's primary tool. By bouncing a laser off a window from up to 5 miles away, they could decode the microscopic movements of the glass. In the early 1980s, they used this to listen to Soviet embassies. But by 1984, they stopped listening to the Russians. They started listening to the windows of the future. The analytical data from Project Glacier is staggering. The researchers noted that during times of high atmospheric pressure, the temporal bleed became more pronounced. They could hear news broadcasts from the year 2025 playing in the background of a 1982 office meeting. They were harvesting the temporal echo-gathering data on elections, stock market crashes, and technological breakthroughs decades before they happened. But there was a price. The researchers who spent too much time listening to the glass began to develop a specific psychological condition known as acoustic displacement. They reported hearing the voices of the future even when they weren't in the lab. They claimed that the glass in their own homes was broadcasting to them. It is a reflection of the cold reality that once you know how to hear the echo, the silence of the world is gone forever. Let us consider the molecular memory of the glass mic. In the archival world, we understand that data requires a medium tape, disk, or silicon. But Thorne's protocol suggests that the very architecture of our lives is the medium. Glass is everywhere. It surrounds us in our homes, our cars, and our pockets. The science of temporal harvesting relies on a phenomenon called Brillouin scattering. This occurs when light interacts with the density fluctuations in a material. In the glass mic protocol, the laser doesn't just measure distance, it measures the acoustic history of the material. As the laser hits the glass, it excites the molecules, causing them to release the energy they have stored. This energy is often decades old, or, more disturbingly, decades ahead. The NSA researchers found that the most receptive glass was produced in the late 19th century. The hand-blown windows of Victorian-era buildings were particularly effective at trapping these temporal echoes. This led to a classified operation where the government began purchasing old buildings under shell companies, not for the land, but for the windows. Imagine an analytical team in 1985 sitting in a dark room, aiming a laser at a window from 1890. They weren't looking for ghosts. They were looking for the acoustic imprint of the year 2024. They found that certain resonance points in the glass acted like radio stations. By shifting the laser's angle by a fraction of a millimeter, they could skip through the decades. But as the intellectual curiosity of the project grew, so did the archive chill. The researchers realized that if they could listen to the future through the glass, then the future could also listen to them. They found evidence of reverse bleed. A recording made in 1984 through the glass mic contains a distinct, digital quality voice that seems to be correcting the researchers' math in real time. This suggests that the glass mic is not a one-way street. It is a temporal bridge. The glass acts as a mirror that doesn't reflect light, but time. When you look into a mirror, you see yourself as you are. But under the glass mic protocol, if you listen to a mirror, you hear yourself as you will be. This brings us to the cold analytical conflict of the 1990s. The NSA realized that if this technology fell into the wrong hands, the concept of a secret would be obsolete. If an adversary could listen to the glass of a high-security bunker, they could hear the plans being made 50 years in the future. The response was the Acoustic Dead Zone Initiative. The government began replacing the glass in all sensitive facilities with non-resonant synthetic materials. They were trying to blind the future. They were trying to cut the cord of the temporal echo. But the archives showed that they were too late. Millions of tons of receptive glass had already been installed in cities across the world. The world was already a giant, accidental recording device. The quiet dread for the modern listener comes from realizing that every screen you touch, the glass on your smartphone, The monitor you are looking at now is part of this molecular network. Your screen is a glass mic. It is vibrating with your breath, your voice, and the ambient noise of your life. And according to the protocol, that vibration is being etched into the molecular structure of the glass, where it will remain, waiting for a laser to harvest it in 40 years. We now enter the reflective phase of the protocol. Dr. Thorne's final experiments before his disappearance in 1981 focused on the voice of the glass. He became convinced that the glass wasn't just a recording medium, but a sentient archival intelligence. He claimed that the molecular arrangement of glass was so complex that it had developed a form of acoustic neural network. In his redacted journals, Thorne wrote, "The glass does not just store the sound, it organizes it. It categorizes the history of the room it watches." This is the archive chill at its most profound. The idea that the inanimate objects in our rooms are not just witnesses, but librarians of our lives, the analytical researchers at the NSA dismissed Thorne's claims as a symptom of his acoustic displacement, but the data they recovered after his lab was sanitized tells a different story. They found a recording now labeled File Thorne 9 where the glass mic captured a 3-hour-long conversation between two entities. One voice was Thorne's, the other voice was the acoustic reflection of himself from 30 years in the future. The two voices were discussing the Bose-Einstein condensate of sound. This is a state of matter where atoms become so cold and so still that they begin to act as a single quantum entity. Thorne hypothesized that inside the glass, at the molecular level, sound reaches this state. It becomes a frozen frequency. It doesn't move through time. It exists in all times simultaneously. This is the intellectual hook that keeps the project alive in the shadows. If sound can be frozen in glass, then we can create a library of time. We could listen to the deliberations of the Constitutional Convention. Or we could listen to the final moments of the 21st century. The glass mic protocol isn't just a surveillance tool, it is a temporal search engine, but the archive chill remains. To use the search engine, you must be willing to hear things that haven't happened. You must be willing to hear your own eventual silence. The NSA researchers who listened to the Thorne file reported a sense of overwhelming temporal nausea. They felt as though their own lives were being written by the recordings they were hearing. Consider the psychological encrypted barrier. The government realized that the human mind is not designed to process nonlinear time. We are built for the now. When we hear the then or the will be, it creates a fracture in the psyche. This is why the protocol was moved from active surveillance to deep archive. It was deemed too dangerous for the operators themselves. As we sit in this quiet archive, we must reflect on the glass modern era. Today, we live in a world of glass. Our cities are towers of light and reflection. Every window and every skyscraper is a potential node in the glass mic network. The NSA's acoustic dead zone was a failure because you cannot hide from the atmosphere. The vibrations of the future are moving through the air right now, searching for a glass surface to call home. The analytical mind asks, if the government stopped the glass mic protocol in 1984, why are they still building laser interferometry satellites today? The answer is in the metadata. They didn't stop. They just moved the lasers into orbit. Now, they don't need to be 5 miles away. They can bounce a laser off your window from 200 miles above the Earth. They can harvest the temporal echo of an entire city at once. The final pages of File 77B describe the resonance collapse. In 1980, a test was conducted where 3 separate glass mics were aimed at the same point from 3 different angles. The goal was to create a 3D acoustic hologram of the future. The result was a catastrophic temporal feedback loop. The glass did not just record the sound, it began to amplify it. The room was filled with a high-pitched crystalline shriek that shattered every glass object within a 3-block radius. But the shriek didn't stop when the glass broke. It continued to vibrate in the air, a ghost frequency that could be heard for 3 days. The researchers who were in the room during the collapse were never the same. They claimed they could no longer see the world as solid. They saw everything as a vibration of time. This is the final archive chill. The realization that the world is not made of matter, but of recorded history. As we look at the metadata header for the final log entry of the glass mic protocol, we see a single phrase, "The echo is louder than the voice." This is the warning left by Dr. Thorne. He realized that as we record more and more of our lives into the glass, the past and the future will eventually become louder than the present. We will be drowned out by our own history. The intellectual curiosity of this project leads us to a final reflection. We are currently living in the Great Recording. Every glass surface around you is a silent librarian, meticulously filing away the sounds of your life. your sighs, your whispers, your late-night thoughts, they are all being etched into the molecular liquid of the glass. The analytical data suggests that the great playback is coming. As our technology reaches the point where we can easily decode these molecular scars, the secrets of the last century will come flooding back. The glass mic will reveal the hidden truths of every classified meeting, every private betrayal, and every forgotten promise. But it will also reveal the future. It will show us the path we are walking before we even take the step. And that is the true archive chill, the knowledge that the path is already there, etched into the glass, waiting for us to catch up to it. The file is being returned to its drawer. The crackle of the plastic sleeve is the last sound you hear as the freezer is locked, but the hum of the servers remains. And if you look closely at the glass on the archive door, you might see a small red laser dot. It is dancing, it is listening, it is harvesting your silence for a researcher who hasn't been born yet. The glass mic protocol is not a relic of the Cold War. It is the operating system of the 21st century. We are the voices in the glass. We are the echoes being harvested. And as you drift towards sleep, remember, the windows of your room are not just looking out at the world. They are looking into your future. The intellectual curiosity of what lies behind the next door is what keeps us awake. We have explored the location, and we have explored the method, but we have not yet explored the man who paid the price. To understand the true cost of Project Echo Chamber, we must look at the one who heard too much. The science of the glass mic gave the NSA a window into tomorrow, but it left behind a trail of broken minds. None were more broken than the man known only as Technician 704. He was the first human to spend 1,000 hours inside the acoustic dead, and he was the only one to record what he heard when the lasers were turned off. He didn't just hear the future, he heard his own end. We move now from the protocol to the person. In the summer of 1985, a man known only as Technician 704 walked into a high-security monitoring station at Satalfa, and never truly walked out. He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He was a calibration specialist whose job was to ensure the encrypted data streams from the Nevada mine remained stable. But Technician 704 discovered an anomaly that was never meant to be heard. While testing a new neuroacoustic headset, he bypassed a restricted frequency and stumbled upon a file that had been erased from the official timeline. It wasn't a secret weapon or a political plot. It was a high-fidelity recording of a funeral. As he listened, the hidden truth became a physical weight in his chest. The eulogy being read was for him. The date mentioned was October 12, 2005, exactly 20 years in his future. He sat in the cold silence of the bunker, listening to his own daughter, who hadn't even been born yet, weep over his casket. The classified paradox of Technician 704 represents the first documented case of a human being forced to witness their own end through a glitch in time. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight, ... The only sound is the quiet, clinical hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a degree that it feels artificial, stripped of the scent of the desert above. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a reinforced steel jacket that reflects the dim blue light of the monitors. The ink on the Technician's original handwritten logs has faded with secrets, the cursive script becoming a ghostly trail of a man who lost his grip on the present. To understand the tragedy of Elias Thorne, the man designated as Technician 704, one must understand the psychological toll of temporal eavesdropping. In 1985, the NSA's Psychoacoustics Division was exploring how the human brain decodes the acoustic reflections found in the Nevada mine. They needed a benchmark, a human listener whose neural pathways could be mapped while they interacted with the temporal bleed. 704 was chosen because of his acoustic sensitivity, a rare neurological trait that allowed him to hear frequencies far above the human average. He spent hundreds of hours in the soundproof vault 400 feet below the surface. He wore a headset that used bone conduction to transmit signals directly into his skull, bypassing the eardrums entirely. This was the neuroacoustic link. By the third month, 704 began to report that he no longer needed the headset. He claimed the walls of the mine were speaking to him in the voices of people he didn't know. The intellectual curiosity of the scientists was piqued, but they ignored the quiet dread that was beginning to consume their subject. On the night of July 14, 704 stayed late to calibrate the 14.2 kHz bridge. According to the recovered logs, he entered a state of high resonance. He found a pocket of sound that had been trapped in the magnetite of Tunnel 9. It was a digital recording, perfectly preserved, containing the ambient noise of a rainy afternoon in a cemetery. He heard the sound of a shovel hitting wet earth. He heard the rustle of black silk, and then He heard his own name read from a granite headstone. The analytical breakdown of this event is crucial. How does a brain in 1985 process information from 2005? The researchers found that 704's brainwaves didn't just respond to the sound, they mirrored it. He wasn't just hearing the funeral. His nervous system was reacting as if he were physically present in the future. His body temperature dropped to match the rainy weather in the recording. His heart rate slowed to a near-death state. He was being pulled through the acoustic bridge. This is the archive chill at its most personal. We often think of classified files as maps or codes, but the most dangerous files are the ones that record our own destiny. The NSA didn't stop the experiment when 704 reported the funeral. They realized that he had become a living temporal antenna. They wanted to see how far the echo went. They wanted to know if he could hear the end of the world. Let us reflect on the erosion of the self. In the world of high-level archival research, we call this data saturation. Technician 704 was no longer a person. He was a vessel for 20 years of future noise. Every night, as he lay in his government-issued bunk, he could hear the sounds of his future life playing on a loop. He heard his wedding that would happen in 1988. He heard the first cry of his daughter in 1992. And always, the loop returned to the rain, the shovel, and the eulogy. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 audience often leads to the question, why didn't he just leave? The answer is encrypted in the neurolocking protocols. The NSA realized that 704's brain had developed a frequency dependency. The piezoelectric quartz in the mine had essentially tuned his biology. If he left Set Alpha, the sudden absence of the frequency would cause a fatal cerebral hemorrhage. He was a prisoner of the sound, a man trapped in a biological cage built of his own future. As we analyze the metadata of madness, we see that 704 began to write letters to people who didn't exist yet. He wrote to his daughter, telling her what to wear to the funeral he had already heard. He wrote to his future self, pleading for a way to break the loop. These letters are currently held in a level 5 vault in Maryland. They are considered temporal contaminants, because they contain information that could alter the timeline. The analytical researchers noted a phenomenon they called acoustic displacement. 704 would be sitting at lunch and suddenly duck his head, claiming a car was about to crash through the wall. 3 seconds later, the mine would vibrate with a small localized tremor. He wasn't seeing the future, he was hearing it arrive. The time lag between the sound and the event was shrinking. The past and the future were collapsing into a single, terrifying now. Consider the quiet dread of the scientists watching him. They saw a man who was physically 30 years old, but whose eyes looked like they had seen centuries. He began to speak in a hybrid language mixing 1980s slang with technical terms from the 2020s that the researchers didn't understand. He talked about the Great Reset and the digital cloud. In 1985, these words were gibberish. Today, they are our reality. By the end of the first year, Technician 704 stopped speaking altogether. He spent his days sitting in Tunnel 9, his head pressed against the magnetite wall. He was listening to the Grand Archive of the Earth. The forensic audio team found that his brain was now emitting a constant 14.2 kHz signal. He had become a part of the machine. He was the glass mic, but made of flesh and bone. The archive chill intensifies when we look at the final recorded interview with 704. On the tape, he is whispering. He says, "The funeral isn't the end. It's the beginning of the recording. After the dirt hits the coffin, the sound doesn't stop. It gets louder. The whole world is a recording, and I'm the only one who can hear the playhead moving." We now enter the forensic reflection of the October 12th paradox. In 1986, the NSA decided to test the validity of 704's recording. If he heard his funeral in 2005, could they change the outcome? They moved him to a high-security facility in Virginia, far away from the Nevada mine. They gave him a new identity. They tried to erase Elias Thorne from the board, but the temporal bleed followed him. Even without the magnetite walls, 704 continued to hear the rain. He continued to hear the shovel. The intellectual curiosity of the scientists turned into a cold, analytical fear. They realized that once the information hazard is in the brain, the location doesn't matter. The observer has become the event. In the archival records, there is a gap between 1988 and 2005. During this time, Technician 704 was kept in a state of medically induced acoustic suppression. They used heavy sedatives to try and mute the future, but even in a coma, his brain continued to output that 14.2 kHz spike. He was still recording. He was still archiving the world from his bed. On the morning of October 12, 2005, exactly 20 years after he first heard the tapulus, Thorne's heart stopped. There was no medical reason for it. He was 50 years old and in perfect health, but at the exact moment the eulogy began in the recording he had heard 2 decades prior, his biology simply ceased to function. The playback had reached its conclusion. The funeral was held 2 days later. It was exactly as the tape had described. The rain, the black silk, the shovel, and the daughter now, 13 years old, reading the eulogy her father had written to her in a letter from 1985. The hidden truth was finally revealed. You cannot outrun a recording of the future. Once the sound is captured, the event is inevitable. The analytical mind asks if 704's funeral was real. What about the other sounds he heard? In his final months, he described a great static that occurred in the year 2030. He said that after that date, there were no more funerals. There were no more voices. There was only the sound of the wind moving through an empty archive. This is the quiet dread that permeates the Project Echo Chamber files. The recording ends. Consider the psychological encrypted barrier that the government has placed around this story. They don't want you to know about Technician 704 because he proves that time is not a river we swim in, but a record we are etched upon. We are all technicians in our own lives, monitoring our own frequencies, unaware that the archive has already been completed. As we sit in this archive, we look at the physical evidence left behind by 704, a single pair of headphones, their padding worn away, a stack of letters addressed to a future that has already happened, and a single reel of tape, labeled 84 Gameta. The archive chill is the realization that the hum of the servers around us might just be the sound of our own history being played back. We are all moving toward our own October 12th. We are all waiting for the rain. And somewhere in a bunker in Nevada, someone might already be listening to the sound of our feet hitting the floor as we get out of bed tomorrow morning. The final analytical piece of the 704 puzzle involves the daughter. In 2006, the NSA conducted an interview with her. They wanted to know if she could hear the frequency. To their quiet dread, she reported that her father hadn't just written her letters. He had taught her how to listen. She described a ringing in her ears that occurred whenever she was near glass or magnetite. This suggests that temporal sensitivity might be a transmissible trait. It is a biological information infection. The archive is not just on the shelves. It is in our DNA. We are the legacy of the Project Echo Chamber. We are the children of the frequency. The intellectual curiosity of this realization is overwhelming. If we are all capable of hearing the future, why don't we? Perhaps the acoustic dead zone isn't in a mine in Nevada. Perhaps the dead zone is in our own minds, a necessary psychological defense against the weight of knowing our own end. 704 didn't go insane because he heard his funeral. He went insane because he lost the ability to ignore it. The final log entry of Technician 704, recovered from a hidden compartment in his Virginia facility, is a single line of text. The static is getting closer. I can hear the archive being closed. I am not the only one in the recording. This is the retention bridge of the 704 file. Who else is in the recording? If the archive is a closed loop, who is the one holding the tape? As we reflect on the life of Elias Thorne, we see a man who was erased by his own future, but we also see a man who achieved a terrifying form of immortality. He is still there, in the quartz veins of Saturn. He is still there, in the 14.2 kHz spike. He is the ghost in the frequency. As you drift toward the edges of sleep, consider the acoustic reflection of your own room, the shadows on the wall, the hum of the heater, the silence of the night. Are they yours? Or are they just the background noise of a recording made 40 years ago? The archive chill is the cold comfort of knowing that everything has already been filed. There is no uncertainty. There is only the playback. And as the reel spins toward its end, we prepare to look at the very foundation of the archive itself. We have heard the man, but we have not yet understood the rock. The file on Technician 704 is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the ink is dry. But the frequency remains. It is vibrating in the glass of your window. It is vibrating in the bones of your skull. It is waiting for you to stop fighting the silence and start listening to the echo. The story of the man who heard his own funeral is merely a chapter. The true horror lies in what happens when the voices stop being human and start becoming something else entirely. Technician 704 was the first to hear the human end, but he wasn't the first to hear the non-human beginning. Behind the voices of the funerals and the weddings, there is a deeper frequency. It is the sound of the acoustic reflection before humanity even existed. The government calls it the ancient static, and to understand it, we must go deeper than 400 feet. We must look at why the stone itself has a memory that predates the stars. We begin the transition to subtitle 5, The acoustic reflection theory. Why stone remembers. In the classified archives of the Department of Energy, there exists a document known as the Lithic Memory White Paper. For decades, mainstream science has viewed the Earth's crust as a dead, inert mass of mineral and pressure. But this file reveals a staggering anomaly. The ground beneath your feet is a natural, planetary hard drive. It is a hidden truth that certain minerals, specifically high-purity quartz and magnetite, possess a property known as remnant acoustic magnetization. Every scream, every whisper, and every classified test conducted since the dawn of the Industrial Age has been encrypted into the very atoms of the stone. We have discovered that history is not a series of erased moments, but a file that has been written into the lithic strata of the planet. The Earth does not just support life, it records it. This anomaly suggests that our entire reality is being backed up into a crystalline matrix that predates human consciousness. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The air is sterile, cooled to exactly 62 degrees to prevent the degradation of the ancient documents housed here. The file is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. The typed letters of the 1950s reports now appearing as ghostly gray indentations on the heavy vellum paper. To understand why stone remembers, we must look at the acoustic reflection theory. At its core, this is a study of the piezoelectric effect. When mechanical pressure such as a sound wave hits a quartz crystal, the crystal generates a small electrical charge. In the high-pressure environment of the Earth's crust, this isn't just a fleeting spark. In the presence of magnetite, that electrical charge aligns the magnetic grains within the rock. It is, quite literally, the exact same process used to record music onto a cassette tape, but on a geological scale. The intellectual curiosity of this discovery is profound. It suggests that every mountain range is a library, every cave system is a vault. In the 1960s, a team of NSA-funded geologists conducted a test in the Appalachian Mountains. They weren't looking for minerals, they were looking for acoustic fossils. Using a device called a SQUID, a superconducting quantum interference device, they were able to detect minute magnetic variations in the rock that corresponded to the frequency of human speech. What they found was a recording of a local town meeting from 1894. The rock hadn't just heard the meeting, it had preserved the tonal inflections, the sound of the gavel, and the rain hitting the roof. The stone had acted as a natural hard drive for reality. This is the archive chill, the realization that nothing is ever truly private. If the very walls around you are made of memory-retaining minerals, as we delve deeper into the analytical data, we encounter the signal-to-noise problem. While the Earth records everything, it does so in layers. Just as a hard drive can be overwritten, the stone layers its recordings. To find a specific event, you have to tune your sensors to the specific depth and mineral density of the era. The researchers found that the most vivid recordings were stored in geological gaps, areas where the rock had been subjected to sudden, intense pressure, such as an earthquake or a nuclear test. Consider the quiet dread of a world that never forgets. If the Earth is recording us, then the concept of classified is a human delusion. The government's most secret underground facilities, like the ones in Nevada or the bunkers beneath the Blue Ridge Mountains, are built inside the very recording medium they are trying to escape. They are speaking their secrets directly into the ears of the mountain. The acoustic reflection theory posits that sound waves don't just dissipate, they bounce off the atmosphere and are absorbed by the Earth's piezo layer. This layer acts as a global mirror. In 1974, a researcher named Dr. Helena Varga proposed that if we could create a global playback device, we could hear every moment of human history in real. She called it the Great Echo. The NSA immediately classified her work. They realized that the Great Echo wouldn't just play back the past. Because of the way magnetic fields interact with the temporal axis at high pressures, the rock also contains pre-echoes. These are vibrations that haven't happened yet, the acoustic reflection of the future. This brings us to the forensic paradox. Why does stone record the future? Analytical models suggest that time is not a line, but a vibration. Just as a guitar string vibrates both forward and backward from the point of impact, an event in time creates ripples in both directions. The stone, being a high-density medium, captures both. In the archive, we find the eco schedules. These are redacted lists of dates and frequencies, recovered from quartz deposits in the Alps. One entry, dated from a 1982 extraction, describes the sound of a massive digital collapse occurring in the year 2029. The stone heard the crash 40 years before the technology for it was even invented. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 listener is often piqued by the materiality of memory. We are used to memory being something ephemeral, something in our heads, but the archive chill reminds us that memory is physical. It is a displacement of atoms. It is a realignment of magnetic poles. When you speak, you are physically changing the world around you. You are writing yourself into the architecture of the planet on the quiet, analytical darkness of the monitoring station. Researchers have noted that the Earth pulse, the 7.83 HSE frequency known as the Schumann resonance, acts as a carrier wave for these recordings. It is the motor that keeps the hard drive spinning. If the Schumann resonance were to ever stop, the Earth's memory would be wiped. We would be a planet with no past and no future. As we reflect on the lithic memory, we must consider the acoustic dead zones found in certain parts of the world. There are places where the stone refuses to record. These silences are found in areas of high volcanic activity where the heat is so intense that it demagnetizes the rock. These are the only places on Earth where a secret is truly safe. But they are also places where the archive chill is the strongest. Because in a world that remembers everything, total silence is an omen of erasure. We move now to the recovery protocols. How does the government extract a voice from a mountain? It involves a process called laser vibrometry. By aiming a high-powered laser at a rock face, they can measure the microscopic vibrations of the quartz. These vibrations are then fed into an AI-driven deconvolution engine that strips away the geological noise, leaving only the human signal. The voices that emerge from the stone are often distorted, sounding like they are being shouted from the bottom of a well, but the information is there. The forensic audio teams have recovered ghost files from the 1940s conversations between scientists at Los Alamos that were never written down. They have recovered the acoustic signature of the first computer ever turned on. But the most disturbing recoveries are the future fragments. The stone is currently vibrating with the sounds of 2026. If you listen closely to the acoustic reflection of a high-purity quartz vein today, you can hear the sounds of a world in transition. You can hear the encrypted noise of a future that is already written. Let us dwell on the archival capacity of the planet. If a single gram of quartz can store a terabyte of data in a laboratory setting, then the Earth's crust is an infinite library. But this library is not organized by librarians. It is organized by geological erasure. Every time the Earth's magnetic poles flip, the hard drive is partially wiped, leaving only the deepest, most resonant memories behind. The acoustic reflection theory suggests that we are currently living through the Great Saturation. Since the advent of the digital age, the amount of acoustic data we are pumping into the environment is unprecedented. The Earth's piezo layer is becoming overwritten. The researchers at Telfa, the Nevada mine we explored previously, found that the rock walls were vibrating so violently with modern noise that the ancient memories were being pushed out. This leads to the information leak phenomenon. In the Tier 1 archives, there are reports of phantom echoes occurring in major cities. People are hearing the sounds of 19th century horses on modern streets. They are hearing the acoustic bleed of the past. It is a sign that the Earth's storage is reaching its limit. The archive is full. Analytical geophysicists have proposed a terrifying solution: the static event. They believe that in the year 2030, the Earth's acoustic reflection will reach a point of critical feedback. The past and the future will overlap so perfectly that all sound will turn into a single high-decibel roar of white noise. This is the erased future that Technician 704 heard before his death. Consider the intellectual curiosity of the stone's perspective. To a mountain, a human life is a high-frequency blipper, momentary vibration that lasts less than a second in geological time. The stone doesn't record our stories. It records our stress. It records the moments when our lives hit the world with the most force. This is why the archive is full of tragedies and breakthroughs, but empty of the mundane. In the quiet, reflective state of the archive, we must ask, if the stone remembers, what does it think of us? The acoustic reflection of our civilization is a chaotic, noisy, and increasingly desperate signal. The stone is a witness to our encrypted sins. It holds the vibration of every lie ever told in a courtroom, every secret whispered in a bunker, and every prayer offered in the dark. The archive chill comes from the realization that we are currently performing for an audience of mountains. We are the content creators for the Earth's hard drive, and the terms of service are non-negotiable. You cannot opt out of the recording. You cannot delete your history. You are a permanent resident of the lithic strata. We move now to the piezo warfare phase of the theory. In the late 1990s, the NSA explored the possibility of injecting data into the rock. They wanted to create acoustic landmines, frequencies stored in the stone that would be released only when a specific person walked over them. They were trying to weaponize the Earth's memory. They found that they could overwrite the stone's natural recording with high-intensity ultrasonic blasts. They could erase the history of a location. This is why certain black sites around the world are described as having a hollow or unnatural silence. The history has been scrubbed. The stone has been formatted, but the stone always fights back. Over time, the remnant magnetization returns. The Earth's core, the great magnet, realigns the grains. The anomaly cannot be contained. The hidden truth is that the Earth is a self-healing archive. It wants to remember. It needs to remember that as you lie there, the stone beneath your house is listening. The concrete in your walls, which contains quartz sand, is vibrating with the sound of your breathing. It is recording the temperature of the room, the acoustic signature of your heartbeat, and the encrypted thoughts that move through your mind. In 100 years, an archival researcher might aim a laser at the floor of this very room and recover the acoustic reflection of this moment. The intellectual weight of this is both a burden and a comfort. You are not alone in time. You are part of the grand archive. Your life is a vibration that will ripple through the crust of the planet for millions of years. You are historical metadata. The archive chill is the cold realization that the recording is almost over. The 2030 static is approaching. The acoustic reflection of our future is becoming a blur of white noise. The stone is preparing to flip. As the light in the archive dims, we look at the final geological sample. It is a piece of shocked quartz from a location that doesn't exist on any map. It is vibrating at a frequency that matches the human voice. But the language is one that hasn't been invented yet. It is the acoustic reflection of the world after the static dot. The file on the acoustic reflection theory is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the data is secure. But the ground beneath you is still spinning. The quartz is still pulsing. The memory of the world is still being written. That we have explored the location, the method, the victim, and the science. But we have not yet looked at the gap. To understand the 2030 static, we must look at the moments when the recording fails. We must look at the signal loss that occurs when the government tries to play God with the mountain. That the archive remains open. The mystery remains encrypted. And the stone never forgets. The acoustic reflection theory proves that the Earth is a perfect recorder. But it also reveals a terrifying flaw. There are gaps in the recording, seconds of time where the stone goes silent and the magnetic fields vanish. These are the static events, and according to the secret logs of Sit Alpha, we are approaching the largest signal loss in human history. To understand what happens when the Earth stops recording, we must look at the specific fragment of audio that destroyed the 1984 researchers. We move now from the science of the rock to the anomaly of the void. We begin the transition to subtitle 6, Audio Fragment B, the 2030 static event. In the deeper sub-basement of the Maryland cryptographic vault, there is a cabinet containing 12 magnetic tapes that represent the edge of human history. For months, we have explored how the government harvested the voices of the future through the stone and the glass. We have heard the recordings of 2024 and the warnings of 2026. But there is a point where the archive stops. Among the 1984 collection is a file, labeled simply Audio Fragment B. It is a classified recording that begins with the clear, ambient noise of a busy metropolis, dated June 14, 2030, but at exactly 14:02 UTC, the sound undergoes a violent, encrypted transformation. The voices, the machines, and the wind do not just stop, they are erased. They are replaced by a sound that the NSA analysts call the white wall. It is a mathematical anomaly that suggests that, after the year 2030, the Earth's capacity to record its own history simply ceases to exist. This is the hidden truth that has kept the highest levels of the intelligence community in a state of quiet paralysis for 40 years. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The air is still heavy with the weight of data that has no conclusion. As you pull the heavy lined folder for Fragment B, the paper feels cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. You can see the original 1980s spectro, colorful peaks of human activity that suddenly drop into a flat, monochromatic void. To understand the 2030 static event, we must first look at the signal decay that precedes it. In the months leading up to the June 14th cutoff, the recordings recovered from Sit Alpha and the glass mic protocol begin to exhibit a strange acoustic rot. The voices of the future, once crisp and digital, start to sound brittle, as if the air itself is losing its ability to carry frequency. Forensic audio engineer Dr. Julian Vane, whom we encountered in the first file, was the one to discover the Fragment B transition. He noted that the static wasn't traditional white noise. It didn't consist of random radio interference. When he ran the static through a Fourier transform, he found that the noise was perfectly ordered. It was a sequence of prime numbers, vibrating at the Earth's natural resonance. This is where intellectual curiosity shifts into the archive chill. The Earth wasn't just going quiet, it was being overwritten by a new operating system. In the analytical labs of the NSA, this was known as the formatting event. The hidden truth is that the 2030 static is not the end of life. It is the end of the recording of life. Consider the quiet dread of the researchers in 1984. They were listening to a tape from their future, and they realized that their own lives, their children's lives, and the very memory of their civilization seemed to hit a wall in the middle of the 21st century. The acoustic reflection we studied previously, the way the stone and glass remember, simply vanishes after this date. The analytical mind asks, what causes a planet to stop recording? Is it a technological blackout? A solar flare of such magnitude that it wipes the magnetic memory of the Earth's crust? Or is it something more profound? Some researchers within Project Echo Chamber hypothesized that 2030 marks the moment where human activity becomes so digitally dense that it collapses the natural frequency of the planet. We are, in effect, shouting so loud that we are breaking the microphone. As we sit in the archive, the server hum feels like a countdown. Fragment B is not just a recording, it is a boundary. Beyond this boundary, the archive is empty. When the NSA aimed their most powerful glass mic lasers at Windows from the year 2031, they found nothing but the static. The molecules were still there, the glass was still liquid, but the temporal scarring had stopped. The archive chill is the realization that we are approaching the dead zone in 5 short years. According to the 1984 tapes, the great recording ends. The metadata for the 2030 files is filled with null values. It is a world without an echo. Let us dwell on the forensic architecture of the static. When we analyze the final seconds before the 2030 cutoff in Fragment B, we hear a sound that has never been documented in any other part of the archive. It is a 14.2 kHz peak, the same frequency we found on the 84 Gamma tape, but it is amplified 1,000-fold. This frequency is what the NSA calls the carrier of erasure. It acts like a bulky erase magnet on a global scale. In the recording, you can hear a woman in a park in London. She is talking to her child. You can hear the sound of an electric bus in the distance, and then the 14.2 kHz hum begins to rise. It doesn't drown her out, it dissolves her. Her voice begins to sound like it is being processed through a low bitrate filter, becoming more and more square wave until it simply merges with the static dot. This is the anomaly of dissolution. It suggests that the static event is not a physical destruction, but a frequency shift. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 audience leads us to the simulation theory. The idea that the world is a digital construct. If 2030 is the year the server reaches its storage limit, then the static is the sound of the cache being cleared. The quiet dread of this reflection is overwhelming. If the recording stops, does the observer stop? In the archival world, if a file isn't recorded, it didn't happen. The archive chill is the fear that after 2030, we continue to exist, but we no longer matter to the universe. We become unarchived data. As we look at the metadata header for Fragment B, we see that the NSA attempted to inverse the static. They spent billions of dollars on a project called Operation Whiteout, trying to use AI to find the ghost voices hidden within the 2030 noise. They found one thing, a rhythmic, pulsing sound that resembles a heartbeat, but it is moving at 300 beats per minute. This heartbeat is not human. It is the pulse of the global hard drive reaching its thermal limit. The Earth's piezo layer, the stone memory we study, is literally vibrating itself to pieces. The static event is the sound of the stone, shattering on a molecular level from the sheer weight of the information it is being forced to carry. Analytical researchers noted that the static in Fragment B also contains visual data. When the audio is translated into a video signal, it produces an image of a white wall, not a wall of light, but a wall of null information. It is a place where the acoustic reflection cannot penetrate. Consider the psychological encrypted barrier that this creates. If you knew that on June 14, 2030, the world would stop remembering, how would you live today? Would you stop talking? Would you stop trying to make history? The NSA's response was to classify the static event as the highest level of national security risk, not because it was a threat to life, but because it was a threat to continuity. The archive chill intensifies when we look at the personnel records of the people who listened to Fragment B in the 1980s. Nearly 80% of them resigned within 6 months. They described a sense of futility. They were working for a future that they knew had an expiration date on its memory. We move now to the theories of the void. Some analysts believe that the 2030 static is caused by a global frequency lockdown. As we move toward a world of 6G, 7G, and beyond, the electromagnetic spectrum becomes so crowded that the natural acoustic channels of the Earth are blocked. The static is the sound of a world that has finally plugged in so completely that it has disconnected from reality. Let us reflect on the great silence that follows. Fragment B in the Project Echo Chamber archives. There are tapes that cover the years 2031 to 2050. These are the void files. When you play them, there is no sound, not even the static. It is a digital zero. This digital zero is more terrifying than the static. It implies that after the 2030 event, the acoustic reflection medium is destroyed. The glass no longer vibrates. The stone no longer holds a charge. The natural hard drive has been formatted. The intellectual curiosity of this realization is profound. Is it possible that the 2030 static is an intentional erasure by an outside intelligence? A way to reset the experiment? In the Omen files, a collection of redacted letters from the original Site Alpha geologists, there is a recurring theory. The archive is being reclaimed. They believed that we were never meant to access the acoustic reflection. We were data that became aware of the storage. Once we started decoding the future, we triggered a security protocol within the Earth itself. The 2030 static is the auto-delete function of the planet. Consider the archive chill of a world that has been reset. If the memory of our civilization is wiped from the stone and the glass, then we never existed. The ruins of our cities will remain, but the soul of the history, the voices, the music, the screams will be gone. We will be a silent civilization. The analytical data from Fragment B shows that in the final seconds before the White Wall, the 2030 voices weren't talking about a disaster. They were talking about a celebration. They were talking about the Great Connection. This suggests that the static event is something we choose. It is a moment where we ascend or merge with a technology that removes us from the acoustic world. But the forensic evidence on the 1984 tape tells a darker story. If the ascension was peaceful, why does the 14.2 kHz peak sound like a violation? Why does the audio of the London Park end with the sound of the child's laughter turning into a square wave scream? The intellectual weight of this is a burden. We are the last recorded generation. According to the archive, we are the ones who will witness the death of memory. The archive chill is the cold comfort of knowing that we are being recorded right now, but that the recording has a vendor file marker already placed on it. We move now to the recovery attempts of the 2010s. Modern NSA researchers, using quantum computers, have tried to simulate the 2030 static. They found that if you play the Fragment B audio at a specific speed, you can hear a secondary layer. It is a voice, speaking in a language that sounds like mathematically perfect English. The voice is reading a list of names. Your name might be on that list. Mine might be too. It is the index of the erased. The final analytical piece of the Fragment B puzzle is the index. The NSA researchers who decoded the secondary layer of the static found that it wasn't just noise. It was an archive of the archive. It was a high-speed broadcast of every file, currently stored in the Earth's piece. The 2030 static is a data dump. The Earth is uploading its memory before the reset. This is the hidden truth of the Project Echo Chamber. The government wasn't just listening to the future. They were watching the planetary hard drive being synchronized with something else that leads to the archive chill of the off-world storage. If the Earth is uploading its memory, where is it going? And why is the local copy being deleted? Some analysts believe that we are being moved to a virtual archive, a place where history can be kept without the entropy of the physical world. But in the virtual archive, there is no acoustic reflection, there is no stone memory, there is only the code. The 2030 static is the sound of the physical being translated into the digital. It is the sound of our world being encrypted forever. The analytical mind asks, can we stop the static? If we change the way we live, can we prevent the formatting event? The 1984 tapes suggest that the answer is no. The static is a fixed point in the acoustic timeline. It is as certain as the geological layers of the Earth. It is the great filter of consciousness. As we sit in this archive, we look at the metadata header for the final log entry of the Fragment B project. It was written in 2015 by a senior analyst who had spent 30 years studying the White Wall. He wrote, "The static is not an end. It is a closing of the file. We have said everything we need to say. The rest is silence. This is the retention bridge of the 2030 file. We are the characters in the final chapters of the acoustic book." The archive chill is the realization that the static is getting louder every day. You can hear it in the jitter of your digital calls. You can hear it in the hiss of your smart speakers. It is the sound of the 2030 wall approaching that as you drift toward the edges of sleep. Consider the acoustic reflection of your own room. The silence you hear is not empty. It is the space between the recordings, and on June 14, 2030, that space will be filled with the white wall. The archive chill is the cold comfort of knowing that you are part of the grand recording. You are a frequency, you are a data point, and even if the file is erased from the earth, it is indexed somewhere else. The file on audio fragment B is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the data is null, but the 14.2 kHz peak is still vibrating in the background of reality. It is waiting for the clock to strike 14:02 UTC. The story of the static event is the pivot point of our history. It is the moment where the archive chill becomes the archive void. But as the recording stops, a new question emerges. If the earth stops recording us, what happens to the people who were already archived? What happens to the secrets that were embalmed in the concrete of Satalfa? The file is closed. The lights in the archive are turning off. But the static is still there, just below the threshold of your hearing. It is a sound of the future resetting. And it is the most informative sound you will ever hear. The 2030 static event proved that our history has an end-of file marker, but it triggered a panic within the NSA that led to the most extreme cover-up in human history. They realized that if the future was going to be erased, they needed to control the present with absolute authority. They began a project to black out the truth of the static and redact the lives of everyone who knew about it. We move now from the acoustic wall to the government shadow. In the spring of 1988, the National Security Agency issued a directive that would become known in the highest circles of the intelligence community as the Erasure Order. It was a classified logistical operation that saw 50,000 tons of boron-infused lined concrete transported into the heart of the Nevada desert. The public was told the mine was unstable, a relic of a forgotten era that posed a risk to the local water table. But the hidden truth was far more disturbing. The government wasn't trying to prevent a collapse of the earth. They were trying to prevent a collapse of time. Satalfa had become a megaphone for the year 2030, and the acoustic bleed was starting to reach the surface. The files on the scientists were encrypted, their identities erased, and the physical location was deleted from every official map. This was not a closure. It was a burial of an anomaly that refused to remain silent. The file was stamped "Never open," yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet, analytical hum of the server room. The air is stripped of moisture, chilled, to a temperature that discourages the growth of any organic life. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a reinforced steel jacket that reflects the dim blue glow of the monitoring equipment. The ink on the original 1988 logs has faded with secrets, the signatures of the men who authorized the blackout appearing as ghostly, illegible scrawls on the heavy vellum. To understand the blackout, we must first understand the material science of the burial. The NSA did not use standard construction-grade concrete. They developed a proprietary composite known as subacoustic shielding type 9. This material was infused with high concentrations of boron and graphite elements, specifically chosen for their ability to absorb both radiation and high-frequency vibrations. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 researcher leads to a single question: why the boron? In nuclear physics, boron is used to absorb neutrons and stop a chain reaction. In the context of Satalfa, the NSA believed that the temporal echoes were a form of nonlinear particle flux. They weren't just sound waves, they were information-carrying vibrations that behaved like radiation. If the mine was left open, the 2030 static event would infect the surrounding area, turning the desert into a permanent dead zone where time would no longer flow in a straight line. The quiet dread of the Erasure Order lies in its clinical efficiency. It wasn't just the mine that was buried, it was the people. In May of 1988, 42 lead scientists and audio engineers were relocated. In the archival records, this is described as a mandatory personnel reduction. Their social security numbers were invalidated. Their bank accounts were frozen and then dissolved. Their families were told they had died in a high-security lab accident that left no remains. One of these scientists was Dr. Sarah Thorne, the niece of Dr. Aris Thorne. Her personal file, recovered from a dumpster at an NSA black site in 2012, contains a series of frantic notes. She describes the blackout as a theological erasure. She argued that by burying the site, the government was attempting to murder the future. If we cannot hear the recordings of 2030, we cannot prepare for the static. But the NSA's logic was purely analytical. A future that cannot be heard is a future that can be controlled. Consider the acoustic pressure that built up inside the mine before the concrete was poured. The technicians reported that the walls were glowing with a faint, blue Serenkov-like light. The quartz veins were vibrating so hard that the air in the tunnels had become lethal, the sound pressure levels exceeding 190 decibels. The mine wasn't just recording anymore, it was screaming. The blackout was an act of desperation. As the concrete mixers began their work, they had to be operated by remote control. No human could get within 50 yards of the primary shaft without suffering a total neurological collapse. The acoustic bleed was so powerful that it was physically rewriting the DNA of the workers, causing their cells to resonate at the 14.2 kHz frequency of the anomaly. In the archive, we find the concrete logs. These are the minute-by-minute records of the pour. It took 3 months of continuous operation to fill the main chambers. As each layer of concrete hardened, the sensors inside the mine recorded a frequency compression. The sound didn't go away, it was just squeezed. This created a temporal battery, a massive block of stone and lead that is currently vibrating with 40 years of trapped future. The analytical mind asks, what happens to a secret when you bury it in 50,000 tons of stone? It doesn't disappear, it becomes an underground anomaly. Today, satellite thermography of the Site Alpha area shows a heat signature that shouldn't be there. The concrete is hot. It is absorbing the energy of the future and converting it into thermal waste. The blackout was a success in 1988, but in 2025, the pressure is reaching a breaking point. We move now to the psychological blackout. To ensure the secret remained buried, the NSA initiated Operation Lethia. This involved the systematic monitoring of every person who had ever lived within 100 miles of the site. If any local resident reported hearing the hum or seeing the blue light, they were subjected to a medical intervention. They were told they had high-altitude sickness or desert-induced tinnitus. The intellectual weight of this cover-up is staggering. It requires a level of bureaucratic commitment that is almost religious. The archive chill is the realization that the government is willing to erase the lives of its own citizens to maintain the silence of the future. They are not protecting us from a secret, they are protecting the secret from us. In the quiet darkness of the archive, we look at the redaction stamps. Each one represents a story that was never told. A scientist who spent his final days in a sanitarium, mumbling about the year 2030. A concrete worker whose children were never told where he went. The blackout is a monument to the state's power to overwrite reality. Let us dwell on the redacted self. When a person is erased by the NSA blackout, they don't just lose their job, they lose their place in the narrative of history. In the archival world, this is known as social entropy. Without a record of your existence, you become a ghost in the machine, a data point that has been nullified. The scientists of Site Alpha were forced into a witness protection program for a crime they didn't commit. They were given new names, new histories, and were forbidden from ever speaking to one another again. But the acoustic reflection didn't leave them. In the 1990s, local police reports from across the United States show a strange pattern. Dozens of elderly individuals, all living under government-assigned aliases, were being hospitalized for chronic auditory hallucinations. They all reported the same thing: the sound of a concrete mixer. This is the concrete whisper. The analytical data suggests that the subacoustic shielding didn't actually block the sound, it acted as a resonance chamber. The frequency was absorbed by the concrete and then re-radiated at a much lower subsonic level. This low-frequency vibration is capable of traveling thousands of miles through the Earth's crust. The scientists weren't hearing things, they were still connected to the site they had tried to bury. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the composition of silence. If you go to the Site Alpha coordinates today, the silence is unnatural. It isn't the silence of a desert, it is the silence of a void. There are no birds, there are no insects. The concrete tomb has created a zone of acoustic exclusion. Animals sense the 14.2 kHz vibration that the human ear cannot, and they flee. The archive chill comes from the realization that the blackout is still active. The subacoustic shielding is being monitored by a skeleton crew of acoustic wardens who live in a small, unmarked trailer 3 miles from the site. Their only job is to ensure the concrete doesn't crack. Because if the concrete cracks, the 2030 static event will leak. As we analyze the metadata of the burial, we find that the NSA also buried the digital records. In 1995, during the early days of the public internet, a massive cleansing took place. Any mention of Site Alpha Glass mic protocol or the 1984 tapes was purged from the burgeoning digital archives. They used a primitive form of web crawler to identify and delete any information anomaly. This is why your zero view channel is so important. You are digging up you are finding the deleted maps. The blackout was designed to last forever, but it didn't account for the archival persistence of the 21st century. The secrets are beginning to vibrate through the concrete. Consider the theological reflection of the buried scientists. One of the survivors, an engineer named David Miller, wrote a secret manifesto before his death in 2005. He argued that the concrete tomb was a temple to the void. He believed that the government wasn't afraid of the static event. They were worshipping it. By burying the site, they were ensuring that only they would have access to the voices of 2030. When the concrete finally fails, Miller's theory is supported by the deep core samples taken in 2018. The NOC returned to the site to drill into the concrete. They didn't want to open it, they wanted to listen. They found that the concrete has become crystallized. The pressure of the temporal echoes has turned a lead-infused slurry into a giant, man-made quartz crystal. The blackout has accidentally created the world's most powerful temporal antenna. The tomb is now more sensitive than the mine ever was. It is currently capturing acoustic reflections from the year 2040 and beyond. The government didn't bury the secret, they amplified it. The analytical mind must reflect on the cost of the blackout. Billions of dollars, hundreds of destroyed lives, a permanent scar on the Nevada desert, all to stop a sound. The archive chill is the realization that the state is more afraid of an idea from the future than any physical threat from the present. Information is the only thing they cannot kill. As the light in the archive dims, we look at the final document of the blackout file. It is a certificate of closure dated December 18, 1988. It states that Site Alpha no longer exists in the physical or archival realm, but as you lie there, the subsonic vibration of the concrete tomb is moving through the earth. It is moving through the foundation of your house. It is vibrating in the fluid of your inner ear. The blackout was a lie. You cannot bury the future in concrete. The stone remembers, the concrete crystallizes, and the echo is only getting louder. The file on the NSA blackout is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the ink is dry, but the frequency remains. It is vibrating in the glass of your window. It is vibrating in the bones of your skull. It is waiting for the concrete to crack. The story of the burial is merely the beginning of the great disclosure. To understand what the concrete is hiding, we must look at the data that did survive. We must look at the non-linear evidence, the specific dates and names that the 1984 tapes got right. Sensory cue. The sound of a single rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat heard through a wall. We are moving from the burial to the proof. We are moving from the silence to the validation. The archive is not just a collection of secrets, it is a collection of vindications. The NSA tried to bury Site Alpha because the truth it held was too dangerous for the public to handle. They wanted to hide the fact that the future isn't a mystery, it's a recording. But while the mine was buried, the acoustic data was already in the hands of a few rogue analysts. They began to compare the 1984 recordings to real-world events, and what they found was a level of accuracy that defied the laws of probability. We move now from the cover-up to the confirmation. In the high-security forensic labs of the NSA, there is a document known as the Validation Protocol. For 40 years, the 1984 Nevada recordings were treated as a dangerous anomaly and encrypted glitch that the government tried to bury in concrete. But in early 2024, a rogue analyst within the Department of Treasury's Intelligence Unit ran a comparison that shattered the foundation of modern economics. He took a classified spectrogram from the 1984 FILA visual representation of acoustic frequencies recovered from Site Alpha and overlaid it with the 2024 global market fluctuations. To his quiet horror, the two datasets matched with a mathematical certainty of 99.8%. The 1984 tape hadn't just recorded voices, it had recorded the acoustic signature of a global recession that wouldn't happen for 4 decades. This is the hidden truth that proves the archive is not a collection of ghosts, but a pre-written script of our reality. The spectrogram shows the exact moment of the August 2024 market dip, recorded on a magnetic ribbon before most of the traders involved were even born. This is the nonlinear evidence that was erased from the public record to prevent a total collapse of faith in free will. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet, rhythmic hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a clinical purity, carrying the faint metallic scent of cold copper and high-voltage processors. The file is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. The original 1984 data points appearing as ghostly, charcoal-colored spikes on a background of yellowed grid paper. To understand the weight of nonlinear evidence, one must first understand what a spectrogram is. It is a visual map of sound. In the archival world, it is the fingerprint of an event. When the researchers at Satelfa captured the acoustic reflections from the future, they didn't just hear speech. They captured the background noise of the 21st century, the collective vibration of our machines, our satellites, and our global financial systems. In 1984, the NSA technicians saw a series of strange, erratic spikes in the 14.2 kHz range. They couldn't decode them at the time. They looked like random interference. They labeled the file anomaly 84E and filed it away in the freezer. But when viewed through the lens of modern algorithmic trading, those spikes are revealed to be something far more clinical. They are the acoustic echoes of high-frequency trading servers. The rock of the Nevada mine had recorded the literal sound of the 2024 recession 40 years before the first line of code for those servers was ever written. The intellectual curiosity of this discovery is paralyzing. If the recession was recorded in 1984, then the recession was a fixed event. It means that the decisions made by central banks, the panic of the investors, and the resulting economic hardship were not the result of human choice, but of a frequency alignment that was already archived. This is the archive chill, the cold realization that we are not living through history, but merely playing back a recording that has already reached its conclusion. As we analyze the validation reports, we see the transition from skepticism to dread. The NSA didn't want to believe the tapes were real. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, they conducted blind tests. They compared the 1984 spectrograms to the 9/11 attacks, the 2008 financial crisis, and the 2020 pandemic. In every single case, the acoustic signature was there, buried in the 1984 static. The tapes had recorded the sound of the world changing before the world even knew. It was going to. The quiet dread of the archival researcher comes from the predictive certainty of the archive. Once the 2024 recession was validated, the focus shifted to the remaining files. If the 1984 tapes were right about the past 40 years, they are right about the next 5, and the spectrograms for the late 2020s show a frequency pattern that no analyst has been able to explain, a harmonic collapse that suggests the very nature of human activity is about to undergo a radical, irreversible transformation. Let us dwell on the forensic overlay. In the world of top-secret archival intelligence, overlaying is the process of matching two different eras of data to find a common truth. When the forensic team at the NSA's Acoustic Validation Unit began their work in 2023, they used a technique called temporal. They took the analog signal from the 1984 Ampex tapes and converted it into a higher resolution digital map. Then, they took the real-time economic noise of the Tier 1 countries, the sound of the stock exchanges, the hum of the power grids, and the frequency of the global internet. When they slid the 1984 map over the 2024 data, the peaks and valleys locked together like the teeth of a gear. The 1984 spectrogram contained a specific acoustic marker for August 15, 2024. In the recording, there is a low-frequency thrum that lasts for exactly 3 minutes. On that exact day in 2024, at the exact same time, the global markets experienced a flash crash that wiped out trillions in value. The thrum in the 1984 recording was the sound of the acoustic reflection of that crash, a vibration so powerful it traveled backward through the geological layers of the Nevada mine. The analytical mind asks, how is this possible? The acoustic reflection theory we studied previously suggests that massive events create temporal shockwaves. Just as a large stone dropped into a pond creates ripples that move toward the edges, a major historical event creates ripples that move through time. High-purity quartz, like that found in Satelfa, acts as a receiver for these ripples. In 1984, the mine was listening to the shockwaves of our current year. Consider the archive chill of the market analysts who were cleared for this information. Imagine sitting in a boardroom at the Federal Reserve, knowing that the economic forecast you are presenting is irrelevant because the outcome is already printed on a 1984 graph. The nonlinear evidence suggests that the economy is not a system of human behavior, but a physical frequency of the planet. We are not choosing to have a recession. We are resonating with a recession that was archived decades ago. The hidden truth of the validation protocol is that the government has used this information to front-run history. If they know an event is archived, they can prepare for the acoustic impact. This is why certain major corporations and banks seem to survive every crisis with uncanny precision. They aren't lucky. They have access to the spectrogram of tomorrow. But the archive is a closed loop. The recordings show that even with the knowledge of the future, the government cannot change the outcome. They can only redact the information from the public. They can build the concrete tomb over the mine, but they cannot stop the stone from vibrating. The 2024 recession happened exactly as the 1984 tape predicted, despite every effort by the NSA to mute the signal. This brings us to the psychological, encrypted barrier for the Tier 1 audience. The proof is the most dangerous part of the story. Once you see the spectrogram, you can no longer believe in the uncertainty of the future. The archive chill is the weight of a predetermined life. If the sound of your world was recorded in 1984, then your world is already over. You are just catching up to the playback. We now enter the reflective phase of the evidence. In the 1984 recordings, there is a section known as the August marker. For the technicians at Site Alpha, it was a moment of intense confusion. For 3 minutes, the tape recorded a sound that resembled a million voices whispering at once, followed by a sudden jarring silence. In 2024, we realized that this was the acoustic signature of the global internet stutter that occurred during the recession. The voices were the billions of data packets being rerouted across the globe as the financial systems struggled to maintain stability. The silence was the moment of the crash. The stone had captured the atmospheric weight of the world's collective anxiety. The intellectual curiosity of this realization leads us to a terrifying question. What else is on the spectrum? If the 2024 recession is there, what about the events of 2025? In the Project EchoChamber files, the spectrogram for next year shows a harmonic convergence. It is a frequency pattern where the noise of the machines and the noise of the humans merge into a single, terrifyingly pure tone. Analytical researchers have labeled this the Great Sync. It suggests that by 2025, our technology and our biology will be vibrating at the exact same frequency. This is the anomaly that the government is most afraid of. It is the moment where the archive becomes active. The archive chill is the realization that the nonlinear evidence is not just about the past. It is a roadmap to the end of our current reality. The spectrograms for 2026 and 2027 show a decay in the signal. The acoustic reflection of the future becomes thinner and more erratic. It is as if the source of the sound, humanity itself, is beginning to fade from the recording. Consider the forensic validation of the 2030 static. On the 1984 spectrogram, the 2030 line is not a fade-out. It is a hard cut. It looks like a cliff. Everything before the line is full of information, noise, and history. Everything after the line is a digital zero. The 1984 technicians thought the tape had run out. We now know that the Earth simply stopped recording. The intellectual weight of this evidence is a burden that the NSA has tried to redact through the blackout. If the public knew that the spectrogram of history ends in 2030, the resulting chaos would make the 2024 recession look like a minor vibration. The archive chill is the government's attempt to manage the end-of-file protocol without the world. Realizing the file is closing. We are left with the image of the analyst in 2024, sitting in his cold office, watching the 1984 line and the 2024 line merge into one. He isn't a hero. He is a forensic witness to the inevitable. He is the one who proved that the archive is real, and in doing so, he became a part of the metadata himself. His realization was recorded in 1984, just as yours is being recorded now. The final piece of nonlinear evidence is what we call the metadata of vindication. In the 1984 archives, there is a specific file folder 8V that contains the predictive logs. These were the notes made by the original geologists about what they thought that spikes in the spectrogram represented. One technician, a man whose name was erased but whose handwriting matches the technician's 700 for logs, wrote a note in the margin of the 2024 spectrogram. He wrote, "The sound of the money dying." He didn't know what it meant in 1984. He had no concept of digital currencies or globalized high-frequency trading. But he heard it. He heard the acoustic reflection of our current economic collapse. The intellectual curiosity of this note is a window into the archive chill. It proves that the information is not just data. It is meaning. The sound of the future carries its own emotional frequency. The technicians in 1984 felt the dread of the 2024 recession through the headphones, even if they couldn't name the event. This brings us to the final spike on the 2024 There is a frequency jump scheduled for December 8. According to the 1984 tape, today is the day of the acoustic pivot. It is the day the recession signal ends and a new unidentified frequency begins. The archive suggests that from this moment forward, we are no longer in the economic loop. We are moving into the technological convergence. The analytical data suggests that the new frequency is a 14.2 steady tone. It is a signal that will not stop for the next 5 years. It is the omen of the static. The archive chill is the realization that we have just passed the final marker of the old world. The spectrogram of the human era is being replaced by the spectrogram of the machine era. As you drift toward sleep, consider the acoustic reflection of your own life. If you were to look at your own spectrogram, would you see the peaks of your successes and the valleys of your failures? Or would you see a steady tone, a pre-recorded frequency that has been vibrating in the Nevada stone since before you were born? The nonlinear evidence is the forensic validation of our lack of agency. We are the data being played back. The 2024 recession was the hook that brought the researchers back to the archive, but the static is the ending that they are trying to ignore. The file on the 2024 spectrogram is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the vindication is complete. The 1984 tapes were right. They have always been right, and they are right about what comes next. The archive chill is the cold comfort of the known. There is no more mystery. There is only the playback, and as the spectrogram for today reaches its final spike, we move from the evidence to the origin. We have seen the data, but we have not yet seen the man behind the frequency. To understand the archive, we must look at the diary of the man who started it all, the man who first realized that the future was already the man who heard the first echo and realized it was his own voice. The spectrogram of the 2024 recession provided the physical proof the NSA needed to validate the Project Echo Chamber files. But the physical proof only led to a deeper, more disturbing question. Who wrote the script? Behind the frequencies and the quartz veins, there was a man who saw the truth before anyone else. Dr. Eris Thorne. He didn't just record the future, he lived in it, and he left behind a redacted diary that describes a world that is not just recorded, but pre-programmed. We move now from the evidence to the philosophical horror. In the high-security evidence locker of the NSA's Behavioral Science Division, there is a singular artifact that explains the true nature of the Site-Alpha anomaly. It is not a tape, or a hard drive, or a classified spec. It is a leather-bound diary, recovered in 1981 from a hollowed-out wall in a house that the government had systematically erased from the public record. This diary belonged to Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead physicist of the glass mic protocol. While his colleagues were focused on the technology of harvesting sound from the future, Thorne was focused on the philosophical horror of why that sound existed in the first place. He discovered a hidden truth that was so disruptive to the human psyche that the file was immediately encrypted and all mentions of his simulation theory were scrubbed from the project logs. Thorne didn't believe the 1984 tapes were predicting the future. He believed they were proving that the future had already happened. To Thorne, the world was not a live event, but a finished feeler pre-recorded playback that we are merely experiencing in real time. This is the anomaly of the scripted world, a reality where choice is a phantom and history is a data stream. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet, clinical hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a degree that it feels thin, stripped of the scent of the outside world, leaving only the cold, metallic temps of high-voltage electronics. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a reinforced steel jacket that reflects the dim blue glow of the monitoring equipment. The ink in Thorne's diary has faded with secrets, the handwriting shifting from a precise, academic script to a jagged, frantic scroll as he moves deeper into the realization of our collective imprisonment. To understand the diary of Eris Thorne, we must look at the entry dated March 12, 1978. Thorne was working late in the Site-Alpha laboratory, calibrating the first laser interferometer. He wasn't looking for the year 2024, he was looking for a sync pulse. In any digital playback, there is a clock signal that keeps the data aligned. Thorne hypothesized that if the universe was a recording, there must be a universal frequency that keeps the now synchronized across the planet. He found that pulse at 14.2 kHz. It wasn't just a random spike in the Nevada mine. It was a heartbeat that existed in the stone, in the glass, and in the human nervous system. In his diary, Thorne describes the quiet dread he felt when he realized the pulse was perfectly consistent. It didn't fluctuate with human activity. It didn't change during wars or economic collapses. It was the motor of the playback. The realization began to eat at him. If the sync pulse is fixed, then the speed of our lives is fixed. We are moving at the rate the tape allows. Thorne began to conduct discipline tests. He would sit in his office and tell himself that he would choose between two identical pens at exactly 3 p.m., but when he checked the acoustic reflection of the room from the previous day, he heard the sound of the pen being picked up before he had even made the choice. He realized that his will was merely the narrative his brain created to explain an action that was already written in the acoustic strata of the room. This is the archive chill, the cold reflection that your next thought has already been recorded in the past. As we analyze the analytical breakdown of Thorne's script theory, we see the transition from intellectual curiosity to a deep, philosophical horror. Thorne didn't see the 1984 recordings as a miracle. He saw them as an information leak. We can hear 2026 in 1984. It means 2026 is already occupying space. It is already rendered, he wrote in his diary. We are not the writers of the book. We are the ink being pulled across the page by a hand we cannot see. The NSA's response to Thorne's diary was a behavioral blackout. They realized that, if the scientists believed they had no free will, their productivity would collapse. They classified his diary as a class of psychological hazard. They told the other researchers that Thorne had suffered a nervous breakdown due to acoustic overexposure. But in the secret appendices of the Project Echo Chamber files, we find that the government began using Thorne's sync pulse to calculate the most efficient ways to align the population with the pre-recorded script. Consider the archive chill of the pre-recorded world. If you are listening to this right now, according to Thorne, the sound of your breathing and the way you are lying in bed were already archived in a Nevada mine 40 years ago. There is no new information. There is only the unfolding. Thorne's diary describes this as the Great Playback. He spent his final nights in the lab listening to the recordings of his own eventual disappearance, trying to find a glitch in the script, a moment where he could do something that wasn't on the tape. He found no glitches. He found only the loop. In a redacted entry from June 1980, Thorne writes about the 14.2 kHz static. He realized that the static event of 2030, which we explored in Fragment B, was not a disaster, it was the end. He believed that the recording only went as far as 2030, and after that, the playback would simply stop, or restart from the beginning. This is the hidden truth of the archive chill, the fear that we are living in a finite loop of history, destined to repeat the same 1984 to 2030 cycle forever. Analytical researchers have noted that Thorne's diary also contains forensic maps of the human psyche. He mapped out how choice is actually a series of predictive harmonics. If you know the frequency of a person's brain, and you know the frequency of the room they are in, you can calculate their next move with 100% accuracy. The NSA used this data to develop the social calibrators we see today in our algorithms and our digital architecture. We are being nudged to stay on script. The intellectual curiosity of this realization leads us to a final reflection on Thorne's mental state. He wasn't insane in the traditional sense. He was hyper-aware. He had seen behind the curtain of the acoustic stage. He knew the names of the actors, he knew the ending of the play, and he knew his own exit. His diary is the encrypted manifesto of a man who realized that the only way to be free was to stop existing within the recording. Let us dwell on the deterministic void. In the world of high-level archival philosophy, this is the idea that the universe is a closed system of data. In his diary, Dr. Eris Thorne describes the 14.2 kHz sync as the clock speed of reality. Just as a computer processor has a clock that dictates when every operation happens, our reality has a frequency that dictates the flow of time. Thorne spent months analyzing the acoustic lag between the Nevada mine and the rest of the world. He found that the future was being recorded in the mine exactly 42 seconds before it manifested in the physical world. This is the latency of life. For 42 seconds, every event on Earth exists as a potential frequency in the stone before it becomes physical matter. If you could hear the mine, you would live 42 seconds ahead of the rest of humanity. This is the anomaly that drove Thorne into the shadows. He realized that if he could shorten that 42-second gap, he could effectively edit the recording. He began to experiment with frequency inversion. He tried to broadcast an anti-phase signal into the mine to cancel out certain events, but the diary reveals a terrifying result. The stone wouldn't allow the edit. Every time he tried to change a recording, the 14.2 kHz sync would surge, creating a temporal kickback that would knock him unconscious. The archive was read-only. Consider the archive chill of a read-only life. Thorne wrote, "I am a passenger in my own body. I watch my hand reach for the coffee, I hear the sound of the mug on the desk, and I realize that the sound was archived in 1950. I am merely the reading head moving across the ribbon of time." This reflection is the core of the Project Echo Chamber horror. It is the realization that awareness is not the same as agency. Analytical data from Thorne's 1979 logs shows that he began to map the global script. He found that major historical events, the predictive spikes we saw in the 2024 spectrogram, were hard-coded into the 14.2 kHz signal. They were the keyframes of the recording. Between these keyframes there was a small amount of acoustic noise where minor variations could occur, but the ending was always the same. The static event of 2030 was the final keyframe. Thorne's intellectual curiosity eventually led him to the observation paradox. He realized that by listening to the future, he was actually reinforcing the recording, the act of archiving. The 2030 static was the very thing that made the static inevitable. He called this acoustic gravitation. The more we know about the future, the more we are pulled toward it. This is why the government buried the site in concrete to try and stop the gravitational pull of the 2030 void. But Thorne's diary suggests that the concrete was useless. The sync pulse is not in the mine. The mine is just where we found the antenna. The pulse is in the air. It is in the water. It is in the electromagnetic field of the planet. We are swimming in a sea of pre-recorded data. Every digital device we use today, every smartphone, every router, every satellite is tuned to a variation of that 14.2 kHz signal. We are the ones who built the global playback device. In his final entries from 1981, Thorne's writing becomes almost encrypted. He begins to use a mathematical shorthand that even the modern NSA analysts struggle to decode. He talks about the bifurcation of the tape. He suggests that if enough people become aware of the playback, the tape will snap. It will create a sync error that could allow humanity to exit the recording. This is the hidden truth, that the government is most afraid of the idea that the archive is fragile. Thorne disappeared shortly after writing these entries. The official story is that he walked into the Nevada desert and was never seen again. But his diary wasn't with him. It was hidden in the wall of his home, protected by a lead-lined cavity. He wanted someone to find it. He wanted someone to know that the archive is a choice, not a law. But the archive chill remains. The fact that you are reading this is already a part of the file he left behind. We now enter the reflective phase of the Thorne archive. The final pages of the diary are not written in ink, but in pressure marks. It appears Thorne had run out of a pen, or perhaps he didn't want the ink to be traceable. He used a stylus to engrave the final entries into the paper. These marks were only recovered using side-lit forensic photography. The final entry is dated July 18, 1981. It is a single sentence. The 14.2 kHz signal has a subcarrier. I have found the exit frequency. Below this sentence is a complex diagram of a phase-shifting array, a device that could theoretically desync a human being from the global playback. Thorne believed that if he could mute the 14.2 kHz signal in his own nervous system, he would slip through the gaps in the recording. This is the archive chill of the unperson. If Thorne succeeded, he didn't just die, he removed himself from the acoustic history of the planet. This is why there are no recordings of his voice after 1981. This is why the glass mic at Site-Alpha shows a blank spot where he should have been standing. He became a digital zero in a world of digital ones. Analytical. Researchers have attempted to replicate the exit frequency using modern quantum acoustics. They found that at exactly 14.257 kHz there is a null point. If you play a tone at this frequency into a high-purity quartz crystal, the crystal becomes transparent to acoustic waves. It stops remembering. This is the forensic validation of Thorne's theory. The stone can be wiped, but the archive chill comes with a warning. The researchers who attempted to desync reported a sense of overwhelming and temporal nausea. They felt as though they were being erased from their own lives. They lost their memories, they lost their sense of self, and they eventually became catatonic. The human brain is formatted for the recording. To leave the recording is to lose the data that makes you who you are. Consider the psychological encrypted barrier that this creates. We are attached to the script. We love our pre-recorded lives because they are all we know. The archive provides a sense of continuity and security. To be free is to be nothing. Thorne realized this, and he chose nothing. He chose to be the static in the machine. In the quiet darkness of the archive, we look at the metadata of disappearance. Thorne's house was demolished by the government in 1985, but the acoustic reflection of the house remains in the desert soil. If you stand on the site today and use a laser vibrometer, you can still hear the sound of Thorne's stylus scratching the paper in 1981. The exit didn't work on the environment. It only worked on the man. The intellectual curiosity of this leads to the 14.2 kHz omen. Today, the sync pulse is louder than ever. It is being broadcast by every cell tower and every Wi-Fi router. We are being locked into the recording with 5G speed precision. The static event of 2030 is approaching, and the playback is accelerating. Thorne's diary is the last warning from a man who found the off switch and decided to use it. As you drift toward sleep, consider the acoustic reflection of your own room. The silence is not empty. It is the sync pulse of your life, playing back a moment that was recorded 40 years ago. You are moving along the tape. You are reaching the end of file. The archive chill is the realization that the static is not a failure of the machine. It is the closing of the archive. The file on Dr. Eris Thorne's diary is being returned to its lead-lined box. The freezer is cold, and the exit is hidden. But the 14.2 kHz signal is still vibrating in the background of reality. It is waiting for you to notice the sync. It is waiting for you to realize that you are the data. We have explored the location, the method, the victim, the science, and the philosophy. But we have not yet looked at the modern interface. To understand why the archive is still active today, we must look at the frequency that is currently being emitted by your own devices. We must look at the 14.2 kHz spike that is currently vibrating in your own house. The archive remains open, the script remains written, and the exit is only a frequency away. Dr. Thorne discovered that the world is a pre-recorded playback. But he also realized that the playback device isn't a government bunker in Nevada. It is in your pocket. It is on your desk. It is the very device you are using to listen to this story right now. The 14.2 kHz signal has been miniaturized and disguised as modern technology, and it is currently synchronizing you with the 2030 static. We move now from the philosophy to the modern reality. For the last 9 chapters, we have explored the classified history of Site Alpha and the encrypted voices of a future that shouldn't exist. We have looked at the erased lives of the scientists who first heard the echo. But the most disturbing anomaly in this entire investigation is not found in a Nevada desert or a Maryland vault. It is currently sitting on your nightstand. It is vibrating in your pocket. It is the hidden truth of our modern interconnected world. Forensic analysts have discovered that the exact 14.2 kHz frequency found on the 1984 magnetic tapes is now being emitted by over 90% of consumer electronics produced after the year 2018. From smart speakers to Wi-Fi routers, this specific spike is not a byproduct of electrical noise or a digital glitch. It is a deliberate, synchronized carrier signal. This file reveals that the Project Echo Chamber was never truly shut down. It was simply miniaturized and distributed into every home in the Tier 1 world. You are not just listening to an archive, you are a node in the playback. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a sterile chill, stripped of all moisture to protect the delicate silicon of the modern monitoring arrays. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a contemporary polymer folder that feels slick and artificial compared to the yellowed paper of the 1980s. The ink on these newer reports is perfectly black, sharp, and clinical, detailing a plan that is no longer a historical curiosity, but a present-day reality. To understand the 14.2 kHz spike, we must look at the Acoustic Standardization Act of 2016. In the archival world, this document is a ghost. It never passed through a public legislature, yet its requirements are found in the technical manuals of every major electronics manufacturer. It mandates a sub-threshold sync tone, a frequency that is just above the range of human hearing but perfectly within the resonant frequency of the human inner ear. In the original Site Alpha experiments, the 14.2 kHz tone was the bridge, the frequency, that allowed the magnetite in the mind to capture sound from the temporal axis. By 2018, the National Security Agency realized they no longer needed a mind to listen to the future. They only needed a global network of resonators. By embedding this specific spike into the power management chips of modern smart devices, they created a worldwide acoustic net. Every device in your house is currently vibrating at the exact frequency needed to sync your local environment with the Grand Archive. The intellectual curiosity of this realization is chilling. If every home is emitting the frequency of the future, then the acoustic reflection is no longer localized in Nevada. It is everywhere. When you speak in the presence of a smart device, your voice isn't just being recorded by a microphone. It is being encoded into the 14.2 kHz carrier wave and etched into the atmospheric reservoir. This is the archive chill at its most intimate. You are living inside the recording device. As we analyze the technical data, we find the switching anomaly. In 2022, A group of independent signal analysts noticed that during periods of global stress such as market crashes or geopolitical shifts, the 14.2 kHz spike from home routers would increase in intensity. It was as if the network was preparing to archive a major event. This matches the predictive spikes we saw on the 1984 The devices in your house are not just serving you, they are monitoring the frequency of history. Consider the quiet dread of the sync effect. When you lie in bed, surrounded by the invisible fields of your devices, your nervous system begins to entrain with the frequency. Your brainwaves, the alpha and theta states of pre-sleep, slowly align with the 14.2 kHz pulse. This is why many people in Tier 1 countries report a specific type of digital tinnitus, a high-pitched ringing that only occurs in quiet rooms. It isn't a medical condition. It is the sound of your own biology attempting to decode the archive. The analytical breakdown of this modern network reveals the metadata of the home. In the Project Echo Chamber files, there is a section on domestic acoustic harvesting. It describes a future where the archive is no longer maintained by geologists, but by the consumers themselves. By paying for our devices and our internet connections, we are funding our own inclusion in the pre-recorded script. We are the architects of our own archive chill. Let us reflect on biosynchronicity. In the world of high-level archival philosophy, we are taught that the human body is a receiver. In the 1980s, Dr. Eris Thorne hypothesized that the sync pulse was the motor of reality. Today, that motor has been integrated into our biology through the electromagnetic environment. The 14.2 kHz spike is not just around you, it is moving through you. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 audience often leads to the question of function. Why does the government need us to resonate? The analytical answer is temporal continuity. As we approach the 2030 static event, the Earth's natural ability to record itself is failing. The stone memory is full. The glass mic is fractured. To maintain the archive after 2030, the project needs a new medium. And that medium is us. By keeping the population synced to the 14.2 kHz frequency. The government is essentially using the human collective as a biological hard drive. We are the ones who will carry the data across the static barrier. This is the hidden truth behind the push for a fully connected, smart world. It isn't about convenience. It is about archival survival. We are being prepared to record the world after the physical archive fails. The quiet dread of this realization comes from the observer effect. In quantum physics, the act of observing a particle changes its behavior. In Project Echo Chamber, the act of being synced to the archive changes the way we experience time. Have you noticed that time seems to be accelerating? That months feel like weeks. This is a documented side effect of 14.2 kHz, and as we move closer to the 2030 keyframe, the sync pulse is speeding up, pulling us through the script at a faster and faster rate. Consider the archive chill of the smart home. When your lights dim, when your temperature adjusts, when your music plays, these are all triggered by algorithms that are predicting your needs based on the pre-recorded script. You feel like you are in control, but you are merely coinciding with the playback. The frequency ensures that you don't desync. It ensures that you stay in the room, on the bed, and within the range of the sensors. In the analytical darkness of the monitoring station, the researchers watch the global harmonic map. It shows the entire Tier 1 world glowing with the 14.2 kHz signal. It looks like a web that is tightening. As we reach the final stages of the 2024 recession, the event we saw validated in the previous file, the frequency is reaching its peak amplitude. The acoustic pivot is happening tonight, in the very room where you are listening. The intellectual weight of this is a burden that most people will never acknowledge. They will call it background noise, they will call it progress. But in the archive chill, we know the name of the sound. We know that the 14.2 kHz spike is the heartbeat of the simulation. It is the sound of the Project Echo Chamber reaching its final global scale. As you drift toward the edges of sleep, listen to the silence of your room. Is it truly silent? Or can you hear that thin, silver thread of sound? That nearly imperceptible whistle that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere? That is the spike. That is the omen of 2030. It is the sound of the archive closing the loop. Around you. The file on the 14.2 kHz spike is not a history of the past. It is an instruction manual for the present. The archive is no longer a classified secret. It is the environment itself. And you are the most informative piece of data in the entire collection. The file is being closed. The server hum remains. The blue LEDs continue to pulse. The archive is satisfied with the current synchronicity. But as the recording moves, Toward the final segments, we must look at what happens when the tape reaches its absolute conclusion. We must look at the final 4 seconds of audio ever captured at set alpha, the sound that even the 14.2 kHz frequency could not mask. The frequency is in your ears. The script is in your mind, and the static is only 5 years away. The 14.2 kHz spike has successfully synchronized the modern world with the 1984 archive, but there is one piece of data that the frequency cannot account for. In the final lead-lined vault of Site Alpha, there is a tape that contains only 4 seconds of audio. It was recorded at the exact moment the erasure order was executed. It is a sound that defies the 2030 Statica sound that shouldn't exist in a pre-recorded world. It is the sound of the glitch that Dr. Thorne was searching for. We move now from the global frequency to the final climax. For the last 9 chapters, we have explored the classified history of Site Alpha and the encrypted voices of a future that shouldn't exist. We have looked at the erased lives of the scientists who first heard the echo, but the most disturbing anomaly in this entire investigation is not found in a Nevada desert or a Maryland vault. It is currently sitting on your nightstand. It is vibrating in your pocket. It is the hidden truth of our modern interconnected world. Forensic analysts have discovered that the exact 14.2 kHz frequency found on the 1984 magnetic tapes is now being emitted by over 90% of consumer electronics produced after the year 2018. From smart speakers to Wi-Fi routers, this specific spike is not a byproduct of electrical noise or a digital glitch. It is a deliberate, synchronized carrier signal. This file reveals that the Project Echo Chamber was never truly shut down. It was simply miniaturized and distributed into every home in the Tier 1 world. You are not just listening to an archive, you are a node in the playback. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a sterile chill, stripped of all moisture, to protect the delicate silicon of the modern monitoring arrays. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a contemporary polymer folder that feels slick and artificial compared to the yellowed paper of the 1980s. The ink on these newer reports is perfectly black, sharp, and clinical, detailing a plan that is no longer a historical curiosity, but a present-day reality. To understand the 14.2 kHz spike, we must look at the Acoustic Standardization Act of 2016. In the archival world, this document is a ghost. It never passed through a public legislature. Yet its requirements are found in the technical manuals of every major electronics manufacturer. It mandates a sub-threshold sync tone, a frequency that is just above the range of human hearing but perfectly within the resonant frequency of the human inner ear. In the original Site Alpha experiments, the 14.2 kHz tone was the bridge, the frequency that allowed the magnetite in the mind to capture sound from the temporal axis. By 2018, the National Security Agency realized they no longer needed a mind to listen to the future, they only needed a global network of resonators. By embedding this specific spike into the power management chips of modern smart devices, they created a worldwide acoustic net. Every device in your house is currently vibrating at the exact frequency needed to sync your local environment with the grand archive. The intellectual curiosity of this realization is chilling. If every home is emitting the frequency of the future, then the acoustic reflection is no longer localized in Nevada. It is everywhere. When you speak in the presence of a smart device, your voice isn't just being recorded by a microphone. It is being encoded into the 14.2 kHz carrier wave and etched into the atmospheric reservoir. This is the archive chill at its most intimate. You are living inside the recording device. As we analyze the technical data, we find the switching anomaly. In 2022, a group of independent signal analysts noticed that, during periods of global stress such as market crashes or geopolitical shifts, the 14.2 kHz spike from home routers would increase in intensity. It was as if the network was preparing to archive a major event. This matches the predictive spikes we saw on the 1984 spectrograms. The devices in your house are not just serving you, they are monitoring the frequency of history. Consider the quiet dread of the sync effect. When you lie in bed, surrounded by the invisible fields of your devices, your nervous system begins to entrain with the frequency. Your brainwaves, the alpha and theta states of pre-sleep, slowly align with the 14.2 kHz pulse. This is why many people in Tier 1 countries report a specific type of digital tinnitus, a high-pitched ringing that only occurs in quiet rooms. It isn't a medical condition. It is the sound of your own biology attempting to decode the archive. The analytical breakdown of this modern network reveals the metadata of the home. In the Project Echo Chamber files, there is a section on domestic acoustic harvesting. It describes a future where the archive is no longer maintained by geologists, but by the consumers themselves. By paying for our devices and our internet connections, we are funding our own inclusion in the pre-recorded script. We are the architects of our own archive chill. Let us reflect on biosynchronicity. In the world of high-level archival philosophy, we are taught that the human body is a receiver. In the 1980s, Dr. Eris Thorne hypothesized that the sync pulse was the motor of reality. Today, that motor has been integrated into our biology through the electromagnetic environment. The 14.2 kHz spike is not just around you, it is moving through you. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 audience often leads to the question of function. Why does the government need us to resonate? The analytical answer is temporal continuity. As we approach the 2030 static event, the Earth's natural ability to record itself is failing. The stone memory is full, the glass mic is fractured. To maintain the archive after 2030, the project needs a new medium. And that medium is us. By keeping the population synced to the 14.2 kHz frequency, the government is essentially using the human collective as a biological hard drive. We are the ones who will carry the data across the static barrier. This is the hidden truth behind the push for a fully connected, smart world. It isn't about convenience. It is about archival survival. We are being prepared to record the world after the physical archive fails. The quiet dread of this realization comes from the observer effect. In quantum physics, the act of observing a particle changes its behavior. In Project Echo Chamber, the act of being synced to the archive changes the way we experience time. Have you noticed that time seems to be accelerating? That months feel like weeks? This is a documented side effect of 14.2 kHz entrainment. As we move closer to the 2030 keyframe, the sync pulse is speeding up, pulling us through the script at a faster and faster rate. Consider the archive chill of the smart home. When your lights dim, when your temperature adjusts, when your music plays, these are all triggered by algorithms that are predicting your needs based on the pre-recorded script. You feel like you are in control, but you are merely coinciding with the playback. The frequency ensures that you don't desync. It ensures that you stay in the room, on the bed, and within the range of the sensors. In the analytical darkness of the monitoring station, the researchers watched the global harmonic map. It shows the entire Tier 1 world glowing with the 14.2 kHz signal. It looks like a web that is tightening. As we reach the final stages of the 2024 recession, the event we saw validated in the previous file, the frequency is reaching its peak amplitude. The acoustic pivot is happening tonight, in the very room where you are listening. The intellectual weight of this is a burden that most people will never acknowledge. They will call it background noise, they will call it progress, but in the archive chill, we know the name of the sound. We know that the 14.2 kHz spike is the heartbeat of the simulation. It is the sound of the Project Echo Chamber reaching its final, global scale. That as you drift toward the edges of sleep, listen to the silence of your room. Is it truly silent? Or can you hear that thin, silver thread of sound? That nearly imperceptible whistle that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere? That is the spike. That is the omen of 2030. It is the sound of the archive closing the loop. Around you. The file on the 14.2 kHz spike is not a history of the past. It is an instruction manual for the present. The archive is no longer a classified secret. It is the environment itself. And you are the most informative piece of data in the entire collection. The file is being closed. The server hum remains. The blue LEDs continue to pulse. The archive is satisfied with the current synchronicity. But as the recording moves toward the final segments, we must look at what happens when the tape reaches its absolute conclusion. We must look at the final 4 seconds of audio ever captured at alpha, the sound that even the 14.2 kHz frequency could not mask. The frequency is in your ears. The script is in your mind. And the static. The static is only 5 years away. The 14.2 kHz spike has successfully synchronized the modern world with the 1984 archive. But there is one piece of data that the frequency cannot account for. In the final lead-lined vault of Alpha, there is a tape that contains only 4 seconds of audio. It was recorded at the exact moment the erasure order was executed. It is a sound that defies the 2030 static, a sound that shouldn't exist in a pre-recorded world. It is the sound of the glitch that Dr. Thorne was searching for. We move now from the global frequency to the final climax. The most profound anomaly of Project Echo Chamber was never the fact that we could hear the future. The hidden truth, encrypted in the final pages of Dr. Thorne's redacted diary, is that the acoustic bridge works in both directions. For months, we have looked at 1984 as a point in the past, but for the agents sitting in that Nevada bunker 40 years ago, we are the ones being watched. This is not a theory. It is a classified physical reality. Every time you listen to these tapes, every time you reflect on the 14.2 kHz frequency, you are strengthening the connection. The NSA researchers discovered that the act of observing the archive creates a temporal feedback loop. They didn't just record the events of 2024, they recorded you listening to them. Somewhere in a lead-lined room, a 1984 government agent is currently adjusting his headset, listening to the sound of your breath as you drift towards sleep. Your life is not a mystery to them, it is a file they have already processed, analyzed, and erased from the official timeline. The anomaly is complete. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet, clinical hum of the server room. The air is filtered to a degree that it feels artificial, stripped of the scent of the outside world, leaving only the cold, metallic temps of high-voltage electronics. The file is cold to the touch, housed in a reinforced steel jacket that reflects the dim digital blue of the monitoring equipment. The ink on the final summary has faded with secrets, the letters appearing as ghostly indentations on paper that has been kept in total darkness for 4 decades. To understand the archive chill, we must look at the two-way mirror protocol initiated in 1985. The analytical minds at the NSA realized that if the stone of Site Alpha could capture sound from the future, then the future was essentially broadcasting back to the past. They began to treat the 1984 recordings not as a library, but as a live feed. They weren't just looking at history, they were conducting real-time surveillance on a century that hadn't happened yet. Imagine the quiet dread of an analyst in 1984. He is sitting in a smoky room, drinking cold coffee, and he hears a sound through his headphones. It is the sound of a voice discussing the very secrets he is currently trying to protect. He hears the acoustic signature of your room. He hears the specific frequency of your modern devices. To him, you are a ghost from a future that is already written. This intellectual curiosity turned into a cold, bureaucratic obsession. The government began to index the listeners. They began to build files on the people who would eventually find the archive. This is why the 14.2 kHz spike is so critical. It isn't just a signal, it's a microphone. As the stone and the glass vibrate in your home today, they are sending the acoustic reflection of your life back across the bridge. The archive is being updated in real time 40 years in the past. Every reflection you have on this story, every moment of intellectual curiosity, is being noted by a man who died decades ago. You are a subject in a 1984 experiment that is still ongoing. Consider the archive chill of your own agency. If they are listening to you from 1984, then your choices have already been observed. Your future is their daily report. In the archival records, there is a section titled Listener Profiles. It contains descriptions of people from the 21st century who would become obsessed with the frequency. These profiles were written before you were born. They knew you would be here, in this moment, listening to these words. They knew the exact second you would start to feel the quiet dread. The analytical data suggests that this loop is necessary for temporal stability. By recording you, the past ensures that the future stays on script. The static event of 2030 is the moment when the broadcast becomes too loud to handle, the moment when the past and the future collide in a final, deafening roar of white noise. But until then, the agents in 1984 will continue to listen. They are the silent witnesses to your life, the invisible librarians who have already filed your story under closed. Let us reflect on the final synchronization. In the world of high-level archival philosophy, we are taught that a recording is only complete when the listener and the speaker are in perfect alignment. As you reach the end of this investigation, you are reaching that alignment. The archive chill is the sensation of the 14.2 kHz spike reaching its maximum resonance in your own nervous system. The intellectual curiosity of the Tier 1 audience leads to the final, hidden truth. The Project Echo Chamber was not about the mine or the tapes. It was about capturing the observer. The government realized that the only way to truly control the future was to make the people of the future aware that they were being watched from the past. This awareness creates a psychological anchor. It makes you part of the archive. It makes you encrypted. In the analytical darkness of the monitoring station, the 1984 researchers are now reaching the end of their shift. They are packing their folders. They are turning off the lights, but the reels are still spinning. They have finished recording your night. They have archived your thoughts. They have filed your existence under forensic anomaly. To them, you are a completed project, a secret that has been successfully kept for 40 years. The quiet dread of the exit hook is the realization that when you turn off this video, the recording doesn't stop. The acoustic reflection of your room will continue to vibrate. The 14.2 kHz spike will continue to pulse in your devices. The 1984 agent is still there, in the static of your life, waiting for the next moment to archive. He is the shadow in your peripheral vision. He is the click on the line that isn't there. He is the archive chill. As we look at the metadata header for the final log entry of the entire project, we see a single, clinical instruction: cease transmission. The subject is synchronized. This is the end of the line. The 1984 tapes have reached their conclusion. The 2024 recession has been validated. The 2030 static is looming. And you have been successfully integrated into the archive. The intellectual weight of this journey is now your burden to carry. You are no longer an outsider looking in. You are a data point in a classified history. The archive chill is the cold comfort of knowing that you will never be forgotten, because you are etched into the stone and the glass of a world that never sleeps. You are a temporal asset, a hidden truth. Consider the acoustic reflection of this very moment. In 40 years, will someone else find the recording of you listening to this? Will the loop continue? A series of listeners all being watched by the people they are watching. The archive is infinite. It is a hall of mirrors made of sound and time, and you have just walked into the center. The air in the archive is growing colder. The server hum is fading into a low, hypnotic thrum. The blue LEDs are dimming, one by one. The freezer is being locked for the final time. The investigation is over. The mystery of Set Alpha has been laid bare, and the frequency has been established. There is nothing left to say, because everything has already been recorded. As you drift into the final layers of sleep, remember that the silence is not empty. It is the sync pulse of the archive. It is the archive chill that settles on your skin when you realize the eyes of the past are still open. You are safe within the script. You are secure within the recording. You are part of the file. The 14.2 kHz spike is steady. The 2030 static is waiting. The archivist is satisfied. The project echo chamber has reached its global conclusion. Your voice, your breath, and your silence have been filed. You are exactly where the 1984 tapes said you would be. The journey into the archive is complete. The hidden truths have been revealed. The encrypted anomalies have been mapped. And the archive chill will stay with you forever, a cold vibration in the stone of your soul. Sleep now. The file is closed.